I got cheese on my head. What do call me a cheese head?
My hand's stable, I feel able to turn the tables, I could do this. Just keep moving, keep your hands up, stupid. I feel lucid, a new viewing. I can see the end, I can see my future, I can view it. It's right there for the taking. Everything I've ever wanted, dreams are just waiting. I just gotta fight for it, willing to die for it, willing to like sort of.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000, it still sucks. This is Philip J. Price, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show, your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me, as always, are my buddies, Big Blue. Jaime's, if you want the other camera, you pay to see the other side.
Yeah.
That's the members only side. How you guys doing? Welcome to the show, everybody.
I'm doing good, man.
We'll start off with you, Big Blue.
It's good. It's Friday. But I work tonight, so we'll see how it goes.
Nice. Does this mean that you're going to be... Oh, you said you work tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, dang, man, that sucks. Am I going to be drinking by myself? I don't know if Jaime's drinking. Jaime, are you going to be joining me tonight? Son of a gun. Oh, wow. I guess it's just going to be me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to jump rope real quick, man.
All right, sounds good. Y'all can be sober. In the... I started a poll. We already got 57 votes. I'm going to end it right now. It's Jack Daniel's Tennessee Apple ends up winning it. I got two bottles out here, guys. I got Pecan Praline Whiskey, and I got Jack Daniel's Tennessee Apple. And I didn't know which one to start off with. So bada bing, bada boom, 54% on the Jack Daniels. The Jack Daniels. Here it is, guys. You won't be able to see it because it's green. Man, I was all excited. I asked you if you were drinking. You gave me the thumbs up, Lou. You gave me the thumbs up.
I know, I'm joking. I'm actually off today.
You son of a gun. You sly mother trucker. So what are you going to be drinking here in a second?
I'm probably going to get some tea with maybe some honey whiskey or something. I was going to drink whiskey with Coke, but I have two kids and I was taking a test and then I got ready for the show and I went to go get my Coke and it was gone. So just like I had to drink it with tea.
It should be a good combo. Jaime, are you drinking tonight?
Unfortunately, I can't.
Understand, my man. Understand. Drink some cranberry juice. I heard it helps.
I don't know about that, man.
Oh, my favorite is cranberry vodka. One of my favorites.
I'm sure it is, Blue. I'm sure it is. Hold the cranberry.
Hold the cranberry. Just had the vodka.
No, you gotta add a dash. Just a dash. Just a droplet.
Just a small amount. Oh man, this is good. I haven't had this Tennessee apple in a while. It's been sitting in my pantry / liquor area for a good amount of time there. It's nice, man. It's smooth. But enough of the drinks. Let's get on with the show and the content, right? That's what everybody's here for. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the theories that are out there when it comes to Bryan Kohberger and his potential innocence in this case. Obviously, he's presumed innocent until found guilty. But let's take that word out of it. There's a lot of folks that think that he didn't do it, and they come up with a bunch of theories as to who has or why he's innocent or why he possibly couldn't have done it. And today we're going to go through those. If you have, any type of theories that you want us to discuss, just kind of hold on to them until after the show because we might discuss them throughout the show. Makes sense. So let's start off with who else could have done it, right? That's the big question right now. Let me put up the banner real quick. All right. So let's start off with who else died. The big suspect right now is going to be a couple of guys, fraternity guys from Sigma Chi, who were apparently got in a fight. One person got in a fight with Ethan the night of the incident, and they suspect that he may have been the guy that committed this crime. First and foremost, do you think that is let's talk about the motive? Is that there was apparently a fight at that party. Xana had to break it up, right? And it was referencing supposedly drugs. That's what, Reddit and 4chan put on there. That I think the dig was that one of the guys was taking steroid and his manhood had shriveled. And so that's
what happens when they take steroids.
Dude,
that's the
did
theory.
Did you say like Mountain Dew will do that to you too?
Yeah.
Really?
The dying Mountain Dew.
I love Mountain Dew.
Love that stuff. Just kidding. Actually, I don't. It gets my heart going. I don't like it.
Mountain Dew Code Red, bro. Mountain Dew Code Red.
Well, we'll see. So let's get back. All right. So he was taking steroids. Let's break this down. What do we know about the scene? We know that if we take the sheath out of this, that there wasn't any other DNA left on the bodies or anything like that, right? So how do we explain this? If there's alcohol involved, right, and there's an accusation of drug use, potentially steroids, and the motive is road rage. How many road rage incidences are there that are silent? Not road rage. Roid rage.
Roid Rage. I remember Chris Benoit. Remember that?
Yeah, but do you think was he going through his house, quietly doing this? When you hear somebody with rage, do you think of them being quiet?
Didn't Chris use a shotgun?
What's that?
Wasn't Chris the one that used a shotgun?
Nah, no. I think he used like weights. I know that he or at least on himself. I think because he took his, life, and I think it was he used one of the wires from the weight bench thing that he has or something like that. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
That's a whole another podcast right there.
Oh yeah.
Hey, we might have to cover that one just so I can get more of the facts.
All right, but so my thing is,
I think that if it was a Roid Rage incident, I think it will be focused on the person that he had the problem with, not different people, that weren't there at the time either.
Well, what I'm thinking is, how does Roid Rage factor with the cameras, the audio that's picked up? It doesn't pick up somebody going crazy. It doesn't pick up somebody yelling, "You said this about me," or "You did this," or "You did that." Typically when there's somebody in a rage, they're going up there, they're banging on the door, they're kicking the door in. They took 4 people's lives, right? 4 people. So it's a lot of rage involved in this. And there's alcohol involved in it. I don't see, a precise going in there and taking the lives of 4 people and it being as quiet as it was with somebody going through a rage episode.
Yeah. I mean, if it was Roid Rage, it wouldn't be planned. It will just be break down whatever you have to break down to get to the person you're after.
Right. And then how do you tie Kohberger's DNA to Sigma Chi guys and their sheath?
Yeah. And if there is an incident that happened, then the first, it's probably one of the first people the police investigated. I'm pretty sure they've been rolled out. So somebody said they got debunked, but the sheath. I mean, you can't explain it.
I mean, how does the DNA get on the sheath? And then the second thing is, where's the white Elantra? Who has access to it? Why are they driving around in circles if they live so close, or if he lives so close, right? And if it's multiple people that are involved in this, are all of these people on a Roid Rage episode, or are they just hanging out there watching this massacre happen without thought or feeling? All of them, every single one of them. I think there's people that say that there was up to 5 people in there. One of them was like, "Hey, I mean, we shouldn't do this."
Yeah,
or
for me, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I mean, when it comes down to, like I said, like if you had a problem with me and I was taking, I was getting to that rage, I wouldn't go and do blue and because I'm mad at you or something. You know what I mean? I would go straight to you, try to get to you instead of anybody else.
Right. And I mean, to go through 4 people, right? And we also have to assume that it's believed that the first victims were on the 3rd floor. If the target was Ethan, why go to the 3rd floor in the first place? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And probably, if it was them, they probably wouldn't know what room he lived in, because so they probably went searching, but they probably would have started with the 1st floor, unless they came in through the 2nd floor because the sliding glass door didn't lock.
Well, I believe they came to the 2nd door, and the reason being is we had there's a press conference there with Chief Fry early on in this investigation, and he said that the back sliding glass door was still open. Now, when the roommate or the best friend came over to call 911, he came in through a front door. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a fence. So it wouldn't make sense for him to go through the back sliding glass door and through the front door.
Yeah.
And, the back glass door was still open when police got there. And we know that the surviving roommates were at that point, or we can assume based on, certain articles that are out there, that I think that the surviving roommates and everybody was outside in the front. So that means that more than likely the killer is who left that back sliding glass door. Right?
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel the same way.
So yeah, we have a guy on Roid Rage or Rage at all is going to walk up from the front, and there's no camera picture of this because there's cameras that can pick up the Elantra trying to park in front of the house and do a 3-point turn at the Queen Road intersection, but they don't pick up these people walking this direction at a specific time. Now, I know at 3:00 is when they have, some people walking in the background of the Banfield. But
the video.
Right. But law enforcement, have evidence to believe that the crime wasn't committed until 4. And the reason being was, a download of the phone of all the victims, including Xana, who was awake through the night, and the surviving victims' phones. So they know when, or more or less. And you also have the white Elantra driving around at that specific time. Then you have the audio happening at that time, right? We hear the whimpering, the thud, the dog barking, right? And so, and to answer Heather's question, who says whoever did it had to have a lot of rage. I feel like if they were the person that committed this crime, if an element of the crime was a loss of control, I think that you would be able to hear that. There would be somebody out of control to take the life of 4 people. So for me, I don't think that's it's a rage aspect. I think it's more of a thrill aspect. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, whoever did this has some mental issues. That's for sure.
Yeah. So,
But like, I agree with you with the audio and apparently, supposedly having Roid Rage. It would have been. It would have been. You right there, buddy? Dying on this?
yeah, I went down the wrong tube there, man.
What's it called? Yeah, like it would have been super loud. It would have been super loud. There wouldn't be no doubt for Dylan and Bethany that something was something was wrong instead of just guessing.
Yeah, I find it. I find that there would be more evidence of that, right? Also, I think that there was a forensic, or they went through the phones connections. Remember, they pulled a warrant on the cell towers that were nearby in that area between a specific time. They would have seen movement, from their phones. Obviously they could have turned their phones off or just left them behind, but I think there's enough evidence there to say that happened at 4 a.m. So if it happened at 4 a.m. or a little bit after 4, and there's the white Elantra driving around in circles, and then is seen at a high rate of speed after the the noises are made, we can believe that white Elantra was involved, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so we still have to find out. Well, do you know if many of the frat guys owned a white, well, at least a white car that could be mistaken as an Elantra with the missing front license plate?
Yeah, and then you also have to tie in the DNA. So did they touch something that Kohberger touched at one point? Did they know Kohberger? Did they shake hands? You know what I mean? Like how do
when DNA is transferred from person to like person, it wouldn't be enough to get a profile out of it, would it?
Nah, it doesn't matter. It's a small amount you can get.
Especially because of his age too, it makes a big difference too. I think it's a big deal, the fact that he's a lot older. And I mean, even from the beginning, they said there was no connection between him and the victims.
Right. So, for me, I don't think it's feasible, just because of the fact that it doesn't really line up with a Roid Rage incident.
Yeah.
To me, at least, it doesn't line up. And the reason being, again, is where's the evidence of that? Where's the door being kicked in? Where's the loud screams? Where's the anger, the yelling, the grunting, all those things? Yeah. That's not on the audio, right? So whoever committed this went in there silently, right?
Okay.
They were silent. Maybe not the whoever was whimpering, and obviously the dog's barking, but the person in there went in silent. Silence isn't usually a tendency of somebody who's out of control.
They're not, that kind of rage, you're not thinking straight. You're not, you don't know, when you're, I don't know about you, but like when I get mad, I don't know my own strength,
Yeah.
You push the door closed, like you think it's closed, you're closing it real slow, and then bah, it just slams real hard. You're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the same thing can go for an ex-boyfriend. If an ex-boyfriend goes in there and commits a crime like this, that's a crime of passion, right? To commit to kill 3 other people, also, to get to your ex-girlfriend, that also takes a lot of anger and rage. He lived down the street. Why would he be driving a white Elantra in circles? If he's lost his mind to the point where he's going to go and take the life of his ex-girlfriend and her friends, like he's going there. He's doesn't care. There's no There's no like, second guessing and things like that. It's just boom. And when a person gets into like some sort of rage like that, there's a lot of craziness that's going to go on, and yet there's no evidence of that, and there's no evidence of him, going in there and of him being in any altercations. There isn't any like skin cells or things like that, but don't you think that there would be some sort of fight back throughout this, altercation? Maybe not a scratch or things like that, but a grab, something like that. And that would leave a mark.
Yeah.
Yet he didn't have any marks, no bruises, no redness.
Yeah. And
You know
also,
what I mean?
In the beginning, we heard that the breakup was kind of a mutual thing, right?
Yeah, so to speak. I think she was
Like
leaving.
civil, like civil.
Right.
That's what I meant. Maybe not mutual, but civil. And I
Um,
believe I heard also that at one point they were saying that they were trying to like at least make it work. I
right.
don't know if that's true or not.
Kaylee's mom believes that they were on the path of getting back together.
Yeah, because I remember that he said that he imagined marrying her and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there are plenty of reasons to suspect the ex-boyfriend. I mean, everybody did. There's nothing, it's usually how it goes, right, in certain situations. But in those situations where it's usually how it goes, there's also some usual evidence that goes along with it. A very loud disturbance, a very loud, domestic issue. You get what I'm saying? So for me, I just don't think that this crime, based on the audio that we have, right? Because we have audio. We have to remember we have audio here. So based on the audio that we have, I don't think that whoever committed this crime, rage or anger to these individuals maybe not have been the sole motive. I mean, I'm not saying that the person that committed this crime wasn't angry or wasn't out of control or any of those things, but to go in there secretly like that and quietly, I mean, what crimes sound like that where somebody enters secretly and quietly? It's not usually crime of passion or those things. What kind of crime is it like that?
Most of the time, if freaking poisonings, that's
like if you have an intruder that's going in your house and it's a quiet thing, like it's a quiet murder. Like that's not an ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. If someone's gonna go in there quietly and the plan is to commit the murder,
yeah,
they're gonna be like BTK, they'll bound their victims and torture them, take their time with them. And in this case, that wasn't the case in this crime. It was in there, committed the crimes and got out.
Well, maybe he didn't have time to do what he wanted. It's quite possible that he didn't anticipate somebody waking up, and him hearing somebody else in the house wake up and him think that police were on their way. I think that's made him leave. The way he left was like, all right, somebody heard me. It's time. I got to get going, and then off he went. Micro Kimmy comes in with a $10 super chat, says reasonably breaking down facts in the case to others only works if they don't believe all the evidence was planted. Simple explanations are sensational enough for some people. No, I understand what you're saying. And I agree there are some folks who will look at the evidence and think that it was all planted. And we're going to talk about, is it possible that evidence was planted in this case? That's probably going to be the last thing we're going to be talking about. So stay tuned. All right, just a little sneak at the last part of what we're going to be talking about. So the ex-boyfriend, I don't think that theory holds a lot of water. Is it possible? I think it's more possible than a frat guy on Roid Rage who's drinking that night.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And thank you, Alley Cat, for becoming a member. So I think it's possible. But I think that there's some evidence that's missing in that situation. Plus, there's probably more information that we aren't aware of. Like, police cleared him fairly quickly. They had his phone. They downloaded his phone. He gave up his DNA voluntarily. The whole 9 yards. So, they cleared him quickly. The Goncalves family, they think he had nothing to do with it. They checked him. They took pictures of him, and of his arms, his chest, just in case. And there was nothing there. So I think either one of those two are make sense logically when it comes down to the evidence that is there.
First of all,
You know what I
coffee cake, yum. But why not at the lab? Because I think at the lab, when they bring in certain specimens, I think they're like recorded when they're taking the evidence out of the packages and doing the swabs for the collections. I think it's all like under surveillance.
And we'll talk about that. The lab is in Boise, Idaho. It's not in Moscow. So it's somebody completely out of the city, out of the jurisdiction, out of everything, out of the county, and not out of the jurisdiction, obviously, but out of the vicinity that I believe it's in Boise. Correct me. I know you guys will in the live chat, but it's not in Moscow. So, that's going to bring up its own problems. But we'll talk about finding evidence and things like that at the end of the show or towards the end of the show.
So, I ended up trying this one today with a little bit of red diamond sweet tea.
What is that?
Bird dog honey.
Oh, nice. Is it good?
Yeah, I actually like it. It's pretty good.
Nice. Alrighty. So, who else could have done it? Who else has been a prime suspect in the conversation? Who do you think, Jaime?
I think it's someone that has the same initials as Bryan Kohberger. I think that name has been coming up a lot, and there's a certain. You know what? I'm not gonna go down the road.
All right. Well, let's talk about it. So obviously, you're talking about Brent Kopeka. His life was taken by a SWAT team on, I believe it was December 13th, 1 month to the day. After the university murders, and he apparently there's some debate why or what, how it happened, why the police did it, this, that, and a third, but it was apparently because he had threatened the lives of some people, right? So
the roommates,
right, and they took his life. All right, if he did it, right, this is December 13th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't the police? This is before they got the IGG back, because the IGG, from what I understand, came back December 19th, right? So,
yeah, I believe so.
It was before they had Kohberger's name as a suspect. Why not call it a closed case? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
well, I ask you this, Jaime, why are they framing Kohberger in that situation?
I don't see why. I mean, who is he? What motive do they have? What are they trying to cover up? If that's the case, you have to go through certain different agencies to get a guy that has nothing to do with this case but frame him, right? And when it comes down to like with Brent, right? I don't know if you ever seen. I think it's I believe it's Schindler's List. Have you ever seen that movie?
I think I have.
Okay, well,
Who does it star?
Liam Nielsen, but there's this part in the concentration camp, right, where someone stole a chicken, right,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the guards, one of the big big dogs there, asked who took the chicken, right? Oh, and he ended up shooting the guy, you know, to scare them, you know, to see who would admit it. And the kid stepped up and he said, "Do you know who it is?" Like, yeah. And he points at the guy that he just shot. That he killed. And in this, it should have been. I think it would have been the same case here. Like, why not just blame it on him and then call it a day, right? That would have been the easiest thing instead of going all the way through a couple of agencies, planting things, the DNA, and everything else. Well, it's like if everybody thought it was him, then why didn't they just stop? And
Yeah,
that,
and it's like if Bryan Kohberger was just the fall guy, right? That's the motive behind framing Bryan Kohberger's, because the pressure from the school, right? That there's financial pressure there. The city of Moscow needed somebody to be handed. Why not, like you mentioned, blame Brent Kopeka, even he didn't commit it? You can cover up. His life was taken. There was a report of something that forced police to get there. If there's this big cover up, they can cover that up easier and make it and implicate him into the murders and call it a day. You're absolutely right. Why not? If Bryan Kohberger is just a fall guy, like you're gonna say, all right, you know what, we're gonna give up on this avenue where we took the life of this guy. We can add to it so that way, there's less scrutiny and things like that. Because let's sure that they add to it and they say that this was the guy that also took the lives of the 4 University of Idaho students. All right, let's just say that ends up being the case. Doesn't that kind of glorify what that was? You get what I'm saying? Like, they took out the guy that took the lives of 4 people. That makes the officers involved look, I don't want to say look good or better, but you know what I mean? It's hey, they ended up having to go toe to toe with this guy, and for whatever reason, I don't know why they took his life. I haven't watched any of the body cams or any of this stuff. I haven't deep dived into why cops were called there, if he lived there, if he didn't live there. That's beside the point. The point is, why not use him if there's a fall guy? And that's the reason why it's a perfect situation as well. It happens December 13th.
Yeah.
The reason they say that they arrested Kohberger was because they wanted him arrested before the end of the semester. That's pretty close to the end of the semester, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. And man, the theories about this dude, man, about him. You even said it, right? About parachuting down and stuff like that. That is bonkers, man. Like, there's also I believe, after his passing, I believe that his friends did somewhat like a, I don't want to say like a not a shrine, but I don't know what it is. Like, they used a knife, right? Like some sort of machete, and they were trying. There's people out there that think that the machete itself has like a blue cloth on it, like a blue string or something, and they're trying to pinpoint it at that dog that got mutilated. And it's like there's theories out there that's like, man, come on, man, like it's pretty wild, man. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And and you know what? I've been watching a couple of other YouTube creators, and I don't want to say their names or nothing, but man, they're out there, dude. They're out there, and it's pretty sad watching what they're saying, But
I agree with that. Which is why we're doing this show. We're going to break down and think about it logically, and we are honestly going to put our best foot forward to honestly answer the question: is it possible that this person could have committed this crime? You know what I'm saying? So that way you can hear a different side of things, a side that's not purposefully, maybe perhaps trying to sensationalize the information and make it more dramatic, you know, for whatever reason, right? Thank you, Nejmak, for your 800. Is that yen?
Yen, yeah.
It says, JP, I'm assuming that's Japan. And following the Idaho 4 updates for a year, but these 3 days, the notifications completely stopped. That's crazy. I don't understand why that continues to happen. Make sure you guys, if that happens, turn your notifications off and then turn them back on and see if that should probably be back on.
I mentioned Biden one time every show.
Right?
And
Yeah.
Is that our first yen?
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen yens.
Right?
I think it could be. Thank you. Hey, look at this, guys. I still have you can't really see it, but it's my little, it's over here. I got a new mic, and you got a new camera. It's my Drunkturkeyshow tumbler. This is what's holding my ice for the night.
I forgot about those. I haven't even picked mine up. Let me see.
So, like,
there's Nikki right there.
So Micro Kimmy comes on the $5 super chat. For those who say it couldn't have been quiet, you can incapacitate someone, puncture the lung, vocal cords, and they're all drunk, just sitting ducks. Yeah, 100%. You know, I think that there's an assumption that these victims were awake, were sober, were had some sort of training to defend themselves. You know, didn't suffer from any type of fear, because if somebody comes at you with a knife, that's a lot of people get scared. A lot of people would freeze. You know what I'm saying? Typically, if you don't have training in being in those type of situations, that's probably what's going to happen. A lot of folks think that get back and do this, that, or third, but nah. And when I asked Jaime, like, what person goes into a house and commits a crime quietly, it's the kind of person that, anger really isn't the motivation. It's the thrill of doing it. Right. It's what does it feel like to take the life of someone else, type of thing. I don't think that BTK went into his houses where he was going to commit his crimes against, yelling, screaming, and things like that, because he wasn't full of like that type of rage.
No, it's that they feel empty inside, or it fulfills or makes them happy. That's one reason why they do this, which is pretty gross, but that's the way some people's minds are made.
Yeah, and we're not accusing anybody or saying anyone, whoever. We're just saying in general, like, in my opinion, somebody that goes in there quietly, which we have audio from 50 feet away, it doesn't sound like somebody full of anger or rage, things like that. It sounds like a guy that's going in there, and the thrill, the feeling, the excitement of the crime itself is what the motivation could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the next big theory that everybody throws out is it could have been drug related or some drug dealers, right? Well, you know what? Let's answer this one. Angel D says $2 Australian dollars. It says security guard friend cutting lines with K-bar. That was somebody who went on somebody's random, Facebook page and said that they were Bryan Kohberger's like sister or something, with no actual like proof of anything, and that was what he was doing. Right. And it was obvious it was a troll, obvious it wasn't real. But anybody can create a fake account and put out some weird stuff out there. I've done it myself, just to see what kind of reaction I could get. If I said some of the wildest things. I even said that Bryan Kohberger, the reason his phone was off and he can't account for what he was doing that was because of memory loss and time dilation due to being abducted by aliens. People bought it. Right. Anything to say innocent, I think. But I digress.
That is true. What's it called? I almost forgot about those. How many was it? Like 52 terabytes or something like that they have?
Yeah, 52 terabytes of evidence, which is probably a lot of security footage and a lot of footage of his vehicle going in and around that town.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see all that. I mean, obviously we don't know everything. We're not gonna know until trial starts. But the bits and pieces that we have been getting pretty much points to, they're getting actually, for me at least, I think they have the right guy.
Yeah.
And for the questions, I'm sorry I can't get to them, man. There's a lot of questions tonight, so I'm trying to run through them, find some good ones.
Just star them blue, and we'll get to them all at the end of the show. That way we can continue. And Mandy, yeah, I was moving some things around. I got to find her to add her back on to the right one. I had her on the wrong mod list. Anyways, I digress. I'll continue.
So it's supposed to be modding the Steelers. Mandy, you're modding the wrong group.
So let's see. Drug dealers, right? Cartel. That's the next big one. And somehow Dylan and Bethany are somehow involved in it as well. That's why there was an 8-hour gap. They were cleaning up things. Somebody else came in. There's even a theory that Cartel at one point possibly employed Bryan Kohberger as their hitman. I've seen that theory. But let's break it down. Let's talk about the drug dealer theory.
Mm-hmm.
Jaime, when you meet somebody for the first time, I mean, I guess you can meet somebody for the first time and somebody tell you, and you have prior knowledge that person is involved in narcotics and that you want to get involved in their business, whether it's buying, supplying, holding, any of those things, right? That there's got to be some sort of communication there, correct?
Yeah. That's funny you asked me that question. Why not blue? No,
Why not blue?
I have a lot of friends. Let's just say that know people, right?
Right.
So, like, if I want to work with a certain group, drug group, I would reach out to this friend, and that friend will reach out to them.
Right. So there's some connections that are involved.
Yeah, they'll definitely. I mean, you can't just go out there. If I'm trying to be in a certain group, you can't just go out there and try to be in there, man. Oh, they'll take you out right then and there. You have to, like, somebody has to put in a good word for you.
So what if you walk to that situation and just say, hey, I got a burner phone, or they find out that you're using like a burner phone to contact them, that it's not traceable back to you? What does that sound like? What does that look like to a drug, let's just say a high up drug dealer? It doesn't have to be any sort of groups or anything like that.
Low end.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
even a low end. Yeah, exactly. It's why are you using a burner phone if you just want to be a hookup, right? And I don't think you go from, hey, do you sell some crack to let me hold, 50 pounds or whatever of crack. I don't think that ends up being the situation. I don't think that's how it happens, right? So there's got to be some connection. There's got to be communication. Now, Dylan and Bethany, I think that they had been there for like a year, maybe, if that. Now, they've been in that house less time than that. I think that was their first semester in that home. So the police went back and forensically downloaded their phones going back to whenever they moved there. And I just feel like there would be some sort of communication there of anything. Now, I think that the theory is that Dylan's boyfriend supposedly could be some sort of supplier, and that she went to that town already connected, right? That's, you get into a big, is that possible? Do you think that that's plausible that she goes into that town connected already and something can happen? Or I still think that there has to be some sort of communication there. And why use a burner phone to talk to your boyfriend, even if it's about your business? What do you think, Big Blue?
Yeah, I think it'd be more I mean, if you want to be lucrative and not get caught at the end, you would definitely do the burner phone. But if you're just starting out, not too new into that kind of stuff, you would probably mess up and use your personal phone. You know,
I
it's
mean,
quicker than having to carry two phones around. But if you watch or mimic the great Walter White or Sal, you always have a burner phone, even if it's a Hello Kitty one.
right. True. Now, and I just saw in the chat, but that Dylan was friends with Emma, and that so was Xana. Emma Bailey being somebody who was apparently was selling drugs. Now, if that's the connection, right? Emma Bailey went to that house to sell drugs because there was a lot of people that would go to the house. There was a lot of party going, so they went and sold party tricks. What could that house have done for somebody to go and say, all right, let's take their lives? Right? If that's the level of where they're at. I mean, and I don't see it being like, all right, we're going to go in there and take their lives in the manner like this.
Yeah.
And there would be some sort of lead up.
I think the only way that would be plausible if it was a super large amount of products.
Right.
Somehow. That's the only way I can really think the cartel will send one of their own. They wouldn't hire a dude that lives close by.
Yeah.
And I don't think if they send their own, I don't think they're gonna get a car that looks exactly like Bryan Kohberger's.
That's yeah. We still got to. We'll talk about the evidence that ties BK here in a second. I'm trying
not only that, but like, man, they'll make sure that people will get the message. You know.
Yeah.
They will every cartel, they like to display their work, unfortunately. I mean, even recently, I think a couple of days ago, they left a Christmas message for a rival cartel, and it was a pretty brutal one. I had someone tied and lit on fire. So they don't mess around.
You know.
Yeah.
Around. Oh, go ahead, Blue.
I was gonna say, when it comes to the cartel, it's either two things. They're gonna show you off to everybody, or you're gonna disappear. They're not gonna leave you behind.
Yeah, that seems how it typically is. And as far as like leaving product there, they had 150 people the night over at that partying. This is a party house. Do you think that that's going to be your number one spot to go hide your drugs?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but there's tunnels at the bottom of that house that lead out to certain areas. Boom.
Yeah. Well,
it's a tunnel.
That's a crazy theory.
To the school auditorium.
It's a tunnel to the school auditorium. Yeah. And under Bryan Kohberger's cell right now. He's getting out.
There was this, I can't remember who it was, but I remember they were showing the picture of this house, right? Mm-hmm. And they were like, that window's too low to the ground. It's like, it shouldn't be there. I was like, dude, that's because there's probably a basement right there. Yeah. He's like, nah, there's passageways here. Like that. Pretty sure that's a basement, bro.
I remember my friend lived on a hillside when I was younger, right, in Wisconsin. And I always laughed because I had been to his house a few times, but we would always hang out in the living room upstairs playing video games and stuff. And then I asked him, I said, there's only one bedroom in your house? And he's like, no, my bedroom's downstairs. And then the game room's in the basement. So you have a basement? I was like, because it was on the hillside, it only looked like it was a one-story house, but you went down and it had a 3-story, basement in the bottom, badass game room, liquor bar, and everything. That was a drunk. So he always had some cool liquor bottles there.
Interesting.
Let me. This has nothing to do with anything, but you were talking about going to friends. I had a buddy, right, that I used to go like party with, and we'll go to house parties, and this guy will steal all the batteries that he could find, like all the batteries from like remotes, like fire, like the smoke detectors. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. It's like, every time I go to a house party, I just take all the batteries I can find. I'm like, that's so messed up, bro. Like, okay.
Yeah, that's a douche move, dude.
That's fucking petty, man.
Yeah, it is petty. So, I don't think that, going back to this drug dealer thing, I feel like that given the fact that all of the victims' phones were forensically downloaded, that something would have been found. Even something like, setting up, purchasing, meeting up, something would have been found. So I just feel like I don't think that's a great avenue. And then we have to also go into this, like, all right, why are they framing Kohberger to allow a drug dealer to go free? Why would they do that?
Yeah. And also, I was thinking about it too. Like, if there were, let's say this is the case that Cartel apparently did this, right? That means that they were holding so much product there that it was justifiable for them to go and do that, right? But I don't think Cartel will be pretty happy to know that this house is being used as a party house, that their product could be always in a risk of being found or lost.
Not to mention how many times the cops get called out there.
Exactly. I mean, I think they were called out there. I think three times in one day. So
yeah. So them. And if you're holding that amount of product, right? If you're holding that amount of product, that's felony, like first-degree felony, right? You're going to jail for a very, very long time. I think if you're put in that situation, where you're holding that amount of product, I think you're a little bit nervous to allow people in your house. You're a little bit nervous to do other things. You're probably looking out your window at all hours of the night, making sure that the cops aren't just going to come in there and bust your house, your front door. Especially if it's that much product that they have, and to the point where something had to have happened to it, right? So there would have been a reason for fear. Yeah. So it just kind of doesn't jive with me. It doesn't fit with all the pieces, right? And then it comes back to, like, all right, let's just say law enforcement forensically downloaded the phones, and if there was any proof that this was a drug dealer, why arrest him? If the reason is, again, to arrest Kohberger because of pressure from the school, that leads me to believe that if the actual killer would have presented themselves early on in the investigation, or up until the point where Kohberger was arrested, that they would have arrested said person to also close out the case. Does that make sense? So if you had any any indication that this was a drug deal or some sort of drug situation, you'd be investigating that, and there would be evidence of those things. There'd be proof. Like, when somebody commits a crime, there's a trail of it, and there's no such thing as the perfect crime. Well, for one, you don't have an alibi because your alibi is there, right? So even if you come up with one, like a receipt or something that somebody else helped you, or all this other stuff, it's not real. It's not true. So you just got to find where the hole is. You know what I'm saying? Because if this person did commit the crime, then they would be there. They're not in two places at once. The drug dealer aspect just doesn't sit right. It doesn't make any sense, and then you also have to factor in that, the FBI solved this case for the most part, right? They're the ones that did the IgG. They're the ones that helped out with the location history for Kohberger's phone. And basically brought him in on a platter for him. Do you think that the FBI cares about the financial issues that could go by if the school is, people don't attend the city of Moscow because of their school? Small city of Moscow, small university when you look at it compared to other universities. Do you think that the FBI is going to say, no, we need to go along with just arresting anybody, or go along with whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I just wanted to answer this because I've seen it a few times in the chat. One thing, why would he have DNA of the victims at his work? If it happened at nighttime, he didn't go to work till the next day or the day after. That's one, like, he wouldn't have it on him. He would have showered by then. He would have got it off him. 2, at home. This guy has the training that most people don't have. He has accessibility to, suits and gloves and footies that go over your shoes. So I think if he's as smart as we think he is, he would have, prepared for it to not transfer from the scene to his car to his home. He probably took off the suit, whatever he was wearing, before he got in his car, and it happened. I mean, there's a lot of cases where people do certain things and there's no transfer of the victim's DNA in their car.
Chris Porco.
Just say like if it did splatter, okay, it splattered on my chest. That part's not touching the seat. That part's not touching the steering wheel. That part's not touching the seat cover, the shifter. So why would it get in the car? It can't. It would have to land on the back of him, on his arm, on the side of him.
That's if he didn't take it off too.
Yeah, that's if he didn't. Right. So you would say, well, his leg would rub against the console. That's if he got anything on his leg. I mean, the crime scenes happened more likely on the bed, and I guarantee you, he changed before he got into his car. If he's a smart guy. If he has the training that he has to clean up crime scenes, to pick up the evidence from crime scenes, he would know what to do for it not to transfer from the victim's home to his personal vehicle or home or work. Definitely work, because that would have been like 2 days later, and there's no way.
Right. And here's the thing. He was arrested for 7 weeks. I've looked it up. How long do you think bleach is good for before it dissipates and it's no longer visible?
Less than 12 hours, I think, or 24.
24 hours.
Yeah.
24 hours. So if he cleaned his car from head to toe with bleach, after 24 hours, you would not be able to tell. So this, there's no DNA in the car or this or that, and there's no sign of cleaning. Well, I mean, would there be a sign of cleaning? I think a lack of stuff could be an indication or evidence that there was some cleaning there. Obviously, the defense isn't going to go in there and say, hey, outside of this obviously very clean car. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
Bleach only takes 24 hours. 24 hours. So if you're really holding on to the fact that there's no DNA in his car after 7 weeks, and that's going to be, some kind of smoking gun that proves he's innocent, I don't think that's the case. Right?
Somebody put DNA never dies. Well, it does. I mean, fingerprints, sometimes if they're able to swab it and preserve it by a certain time, and you're right, some of the dry blood cells can be picked up, but if he changed his suit and there is nothing to get DNA from, then it's not going to be there. Can't magically make it appear. It ain't the Lucky Charms guy.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, drug dealer aspect doesn't work. Brent Kopeka doesn't work. It just, And when you fit it in with the evidence that's there, those two guys, the boyfriend doesn't work. The frat guys don't work. There's no there's no sound of Roid Rage coming through. There's no raging person going through the house. So they arrest Bryan Kohberger. Well, let's talk about the evidence against Bryan Kohberger and how we can look at it and really see how can we explain it. And then at the end, once we've come up with logical explanations for each part, we'll put that together to get one story that is logical, that makes sense as to how Bryan Kohberger could be innocent, right? So if he didn't commit the crime, do you think that it's just by happen chance that he was arrested, or do you think that somebody purposefully framed? What do you think, Blue?
I think what was the question one more time?
If Bryan Kohberger is arrested,
okay,
is it because everything is coincidental and they got the wrong guy and police just really don't know or have any clue who really committed this crime? Or, hold on. Shit, I forgot what my question was too. It's either.
Would they I kind of get the gist of it. So
yeah.
I would say,
is it okay? Is it by chance or did they frame him?
I think it's neither. I think it's the evidence shows
No,
it's him.
No, I get that. I get that. What I'm saying is, if he was innocent, let's try to put our best foot forward.
Okay. So
and play devil's advocate, right? And then we're gonna look at that information and see if it makes sense. So, if Bryan Kohberger is innocent, is everything by coincidence or is it by frame? I think that's the first question we have to ask.
It would have to be coincidence.
All right, let's
frame somebody it takes a lot of work.
So, all right. So we know that Bryan Kohberger was driving his car that night, was in his car during the times of the murders or around the time of the murders, because that's what his alibi is. He was driving his car around that night. So if it's a coincidence, then while he was driving around with his cell phone off or out of cell coverage, somebody else committed a murder or the murders and drove a vehicle that looked very similar to his without a front license plate, and committed the murders and was finished and out of there before phone came back.
Yeah, that's the my cousin Vinny plot.
Right.
Right.
Now why would Kohberger's phone be off? Is it because he purposely just turns it off because he wants it to be quiet? I'm not sure, who's calling him at 3, 4, 5 in the morning on a Sunday morning, but maybe he doesn't like those spam calls.
It's all those expired insurance,
They're looking for his warranty at 4 in the morning on a Sunday.
Yeah, his warranty.
So he either turned it off, he either lost battery, or his phone lost service. So let's start off with the service one. Where was his phone at when it turned off or lost service?
It was in
Pullman.
Yeah, Pullman.
And where was the phone when it came back on? It was outside of Moscow, south of Moscow, right?
Going south of Moscow, yeah.
On the highway. So to get there from Pullman and to get to where he was at south of Moscow, he would have had to have driven through Moscow. So for his phone to have lost service, we would have to believe that his phone lost service in the city where service would be strongest, and it regained service after driving through a town where service would also be strongest, and it doesn't come on until after he gets out of town, where service would probably be weaker, and it stays on for that trip all the way down towards Washington, or not towards Washington. Yeah, all the way down and then all the way back up. So we would have to believe that that's the case. And then also we know that there was a warrant for this, the cell phones in the area where the King Road residence was. And those phones weren't affected by the blackout that Bryan Kohberger was apparently going through.
Blackout.
I don't think that the phone being out of service makes any sense.
There's multiple towers, right?
Yeah, there's a few towers in that area.
Yeah. There's multiple towers. That's a one unlucky dude, bro.
Yeah. For his phone to be the only one too.
Let me be the devil's advocate on this part, okay?
All right, let's hear it. That's what we want to hear.
So in Wisconsin, I lived in a small town. When I did live in town, my service was horrible. I could not make calls. I literally had to drive to the edge of town to make the calls on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he had that kind of service with his phone. The only way they can find out is by them taking his phone.
Oh, you have a track phone?
No, it was back in Wisconsin. They used
was that a
Verizon.
Consistent thing?
It was a consistent thing. I had AT&T.
Like you could walk to a certain spot and it would happen.
It would work, yeah.
All right. So then, how do you explain? How do you explain it working perfect the next day at 9 o'clock when he?
That's the thing. It's like they would have to see the phone records and see if it worked out consistently. Mine was a constant thing. I could not answer phones in my house. I would have to like step out of my house, maybe take probably a 30-foot walk up the hill, and my phone would start getting more bars, and then it would start getting all the messages and receiving all the missed calls, and then I would see who called me. But this was like 20 years ago. I'm pretty sure everything's a lot better now.
Also, so when you were driving around, because Kohberger wasn't sitting still, right? He was driving around. When you were driving through that area, were there times where service would come in and out?
Yeah, because it would go.
So it wasn't a consistent 2 hours and 20 minutes of out of service, unless you were out in the boonies for that 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't consistent. It would be in and out.
Yeah. So why do you think? So that doesn't make sense as well when Kohberger's phone was off consistent throughout the entire time. You know, it didn't come back on. It wasn't spotty. You know, it would have connected to a car and it would have been recorded. All right. So it's consistently off. That tells me that the phone is either in airplane mode or the phone is off, purposefully not connected to the network.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially like you said, like the next day was working perfectly fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why would his phone be off or on airplane mode? It's 2 o'clock in the morning when he turns off and 4 o'clock when he turns it back on. So he's afraid of phone calls between 2:50 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday morning. You know, on his long drive, he doesn't want to be interrupted by phone calls.
Well, that's the time that Jeff from State Farm would have been calling in. That's why he has it off. You know.
So it's not the entire night. It's not any of those things. It's throughout that specific time, right? It's a question. Maybe he was trying to preserve his battery, but then why turn it on an hour from where your destination is while you're traveling through the side, through rural area where service is probably going to be spotty and connecting to towers is going to have to happen. And that takes battery. That kills your battery. When you're out in an area where your phone's trying to connect tower back and forth, that kills your battery. So, he drove for an hour after the fact, with that. Maybe he was hooking up.
Maybe.
Okay. So if he was hooking up and he turned his phone off for that amount of time, and he's out there hooking up. How does that still explain his DNA on the sheath? I mean, maybe he's got a long reach or something. I don't know.
And if he was hooking up, that would be the perfect excuse, because that would be a witness to his time.
An alibi. His alibi. You're right. That'd be an alibi. So he wasn't hooking up because, according to him, he was driving around. Way to be sober. Way to be sober, because I'm not. So his alibi says he was driving around and hooking up.
He was looking for a dairy farm to go tip cows over.
Unless that was the hookup, you know. Now, so he's driving around. He turns his phone off. You know, does it necessarily mean that he committed the crime? No. Is it suspicious as hell? I think so. And then you have to add on the fact that his DNA is there, and then there's video of a white car without a front license plate that looks like his. You know, at a certain point, but you know, let's break it down. Let's talk it one by one. So his phone being off, we're gonna say the most logical reason is because, and I'm gonna write this down. I don't know what I do with my pen. Blue, you're gonna do this.
But I get the analogy. You know what I mean? Like some people, they follow the dots. You know, like when you were a kid, you'd get the little drawings and you'd follow the dots, and you'd get like a baseball or football. Yeah. Some of you mofos would get an alien out of that football or baseball. The way the dots connect you're doing.
Yeah. Well, let's go with the most logical reason. I found my pen, and I'm going to put it down because we're going to put this story together at the end. You know what I mean? So the most logical explanation, based on the information that we have, is that his phone was either off or in airplane mode, because it would have connected throughout that entire 2-hour period, at least briefly. That would have been, you know, shown up somewhere, and it would have shown up where he was. Also, the fact that his phone going off in the area where the signal would be strongest, driving through an area where signal would be strongest, and when it does come back on is where signal's not the strongest. So the most logical explanation for the 2-hour window straight is that his phone was off or on airplane mode. And what is the reason why, Blue? What is the most logical reason why he would turn his phone off or put it on airplane mode for 2 hours?
There is no reason unless his phone died. But it doesn't take 2 hours to be able to turn your phone back on if you're charging it while you're driving. It takes maybe 5 minutes for it to get a couple percentages in it, and then you can turn your phone back on.
Right.
So I think this was deliberate.
Right. Well, I understand. I think so too. But we're trying to put forth the best effort that we can to make this seem logical. So the most reasonable one you're saying is that his phone may have died.
Yeah.
It died in Pullman, Washington, doesn't come back on until he's outside of Moscow, Idaho. Why does his phone back on then? Yeah. Is it because he charged it the entire time while it was off?
He was charging it, and then he needed directions to get back home when he got lost from his nightly stroll. Remember, he was owl watching that night. That's just me. That was just me joking. I've been saying that since the beginning. When he said he was just out for a stroll, he was out looking for owls.
So I'm going to say that I think that the most logical reason, I mean, if his battery died, it's hard to believe that his battery dying is the reason. And they're going to have, they have Bryan Kohberger's phone. So they're going to have a download of his phone, right? And if his phone, when you charge it and you plug it in and you start charging it, it starts taking up data. It informs, the computer or whatever, that it's being charged. It doesn't even have to be on, right? It's been activated at that moment. And so they're going to know a lot of things when that happens. So if that is true, they're going to know that his phone died because of a battery issue. You get what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
and why take 2 hours to turn it back on? Like, what's the motive there to be driving around at night with your phone not receiving calls? Because, like you mentioned before, it doesn't take very long once you plug it in to start charging it. And if he went and bought a charger somewhere, where's the proof of that purchase? There's surveillance. There's, did he pay with cash? If he didn't, if he paid with a credit card or debit card, where's that transaction? So I think maybe he turned it off because, he doesn't like calls between 2 and 4 a.m. Yeah, have you seen anything in the live chat that makes more sense as to why his phone would be purposefully turned off between those hours?
I don't see anything yet. I'm looking. Quite a bit of y'all. Bill says because you don't have service.
Yeah, I don't buy the service stuff. Like, we just explained that. That's the most unlogical explanation for why his phone wasn't. Maybe he was hooking up with himself. He's like, he better not. He's so popular, right? He's a popular guy. He better not risk a 2 to 4 a.m. phone call to hook up with himself out in the middle of nowhere. Right.
He didn't want to wake up the farmer because then he would get booted off the farm.
Maybe the phone was updating. I think that phones have to be connected to Wi-Fi and also be connected to a power source or have efficient power for it to go through. So there's a couple of things that have to happen there. He has to have sufficient power or it be connected. And I believe most of the time you have to be connected to Wi-Fi. So I doubt that he was in the middle of nowhere trying to update his phone. And I doubt it's also going to take 2 hours for that to happen. But it's a possibility, I guess. And there would be a timestamp of that his phone was being updated at that specific time. You know what I'm saying? So we would know that. And that could be part of his evidence that says that, hey, I legitimately turned my phone off, not because I'm in a crime, but because my phone was updating. All right.
Maybe.
So
there would be a tracking info when it would say updated this time, this day. Our phones are too smart for us to think that they're dumb. That's my theory.
Yeah. So what about the white car? So there's a white car seen area just before the murders. During the time that noises are heard from the audio, white car is not seen. And then it's seen speeding away, at 420 down Willensa Drive. Based on the information that, the footage and everything else, not saying that it's Bryan Kohberger driving that car. Assume that the person that is driving that car or the persons in that car are affiliated with the crime. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if Bryan Kohberger is innocent, that means that, and he's driving his own car based on his alibi, that somebody else is driving a car without a front license plate that looks very similar to his. Do you think that's coincidental or do you think that's on purpose? We also have to factor in that his DNA ended up on a sheath. So I think that leads more towards not coincidental, because what's the coincidence that his DNA is there and a car matching his is outside of the house?
If he was back home, it would be more coincidental because I believe in that state they require 2 license plates. So if it was a local, you would have to have the front plate.
Right. Well, so then it would be somebody was purposefully trying to appear to be Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah.
Right. Now, where does other white Elantra come from? One of the biggest things that I hear is that it couldn't have been Bryan Kohberger because he wouldn't use his own car. Well, obviously, the real killer didn't use his own car because he wasn't caught. So where did he get that white Elantra? And why hasn't that white Elantra been reported stolen, missing, or, the person that owns that Elantra come forward?
That's because at Enterprise, they wash your cars when you turn them in. They clean them.
But you don't think that law enforcement is going to go check out the rental cars?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they would. They would look around.
That's the first place you look.
Yeah.
So I just don't see that being plausible. Taking somebody else's car never made sense to me. It never made sense to me. That's a sure way of getting caught. Now, so we would have to assume that maybe it was his own car. So what are the chances that the real killer, Bryan Kohberger, drive the same exact car, and Bryan Kohberger's DNA is the one that ends up on the sheath?
Yeah. It's a very, very minute percentage.
So what would be the best logical explanation for a white car without a front license plate being in that area and it not be Bryan Kohberger?
At that time of night, the only explanation is it'd be somebody going to work, coming home from work.
Drive around that many times, though?
Ubering is the only other thing I can think of. But when you Uber, it tracks you, and
right.
They would have to. I'm pretty sure the police can actually request Uber for their I guess their tracking platform to see who was driving out that night, what cars were they registered to. Even though they don't really check it out, because I know for a fact that a friend of mine had his car registered, but when he crashed it, he would use his wife's car, and he would just have his car registered as the Uber car he was using, because it was Uber Eats. It wasn't Uber like to pick up people, and that's the only way they would know there was a difference, because that person would be like, "Hey, you're supposed to pull up on a white car, not a blue one." So that's only
Well, we know that there was a DoorDash that was in the area, and that could have been the vehicle that was driving around. However, police, they've identified who the DoorDash person is. If the DoorDash person drove a white Elantra, didn't have a front license plate, why are you looking for that vehicle still? Right? That doesn't make any sense. So I don't think it's one of those. I strongly believe, based on the fact that it was driving around before the noises were heard and leaving, at a high rate of speed after the noises were heard, tells me that vehicle, the occupant or the driver of that vehicle was involved in the homicide. So is it just by chance that the real killer drove an Elantra blue that looked like Bryan Kohberger's? Do you think it was purposefully done to look like Bryan Kohberger's? Because there's also DNA on the sheath. You have to add that also. I think that makes me believe more and lean more towards it had to have been planted. Or
yeah, I mean, that's the only way you would be able to get his DNA on the sheath is to plant it before it was collected by the police. It would have to be premeditated.
Right, premeditated, and they would have had to have known that Bryan Kohberger, they're gonna frame him before they actually committed the crime, because the knife sheath is found early on. Now, I know in the probable cause affidavit it says when Sergeant locates it. Doesn't say when forensics had first located it or any of those things. We haven't seen that stuff. We haven't seen those reports yet. So it's very much possible that it's probably documented much earlier than when Sergeant Payne showed up to the scene, or Corporal Payne. So we are to believe that the white Elantra then was purposefully made to look like Bryan Kohberger's. So we're going back to the frame job, and we'll talk about that. Now we have the DNA on the knife sheath. We've talked about that a lot. how would you explain the DNA on the knife piece logically, and then not implicate Bryan Kohberger in this murder?
I mean, the only way you would say, that it got there is by him saying that he picked it up somewhere and
Well,
he
he did.
put it back down. Like say, hey, I went to, let's say, a knife and gun show, and I asked the dealer there, hey, can I see that knife there? He picked it up, he opened the button, and that's how the only way they can get his DNA on there and put it back down.
Now remember,
Or maybe
we're leaning towards a frame job, so
yeah.
I don't think it would be happen chance that they're framing him and it just so happened he touched the murder weapon somewhere else. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It would have to be somebody that knew that he had that style knife and where he kept it also.
Well, he supposedly purchased a K-bar knife in April 2022. That's missing.
Yep.
Right. Do you think that, and who's the only person that can explain his DNA being on the sheath when it comes to the defense?
It'd be him.
What's that, Blue?
It'd be him. He'd be the only one that can explain.
Right. So he'd have to take the stand. So when law enforcement goes up there and says that he turned his phone off purposefully and he did all these things, the defense attorney can't, go up to, because they're going to ask, for instance, the expert, right, that knows about cell phone data and this, that, and the third. And they're going to say, yeah, his phone turned off at this point, turned on at that point. This is where they were located. The defense team going to go in there and say, is it possible that Bryan Kohberger could have done this or could have done that? Because that's speculation, right? You can't speculate. They can only answer with the only person to answer that question is Bryan Kohberger. So he would have to take the stand. I don't see him taking the stand in this case. So a lot of the things when it comes to were you that close? Where were you? The 12 times that you were driving around, because he's the only one that can answer that question. The prosecution is going to come in and display the evidence as he was parked out there stalking these individuals on this date, on that date, on that date, at this time, such and such, right? The only person that can go up there and say, where's that, is him. The defense attorney can't go up to the expert and say, is it possible that that person was in the area because of a friend? I don't know. Who's a friend? The only person that can answer that is Bryan Kohberger, because if that's speculation on that one part, and the prosecution would object right away if they try to ask, try to say something like that. And like I said, the only person that can answer those questions are going to be Kohberger. So with that being said, do you think he's a stand?
I mean, I think he will have to take the stand, man. I think he can't plead the fifth. If he really is innocent, then he has to prove to everybody that he's innocent, because the evidence shows to me that it's him. But like I said, he's innocent to proving guilty by his peers. So we have to see how the court hearing comes out.
So how do we put Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath? If it was by happen chance, what's the most logical explanation? That it was just by coincidence that he picked up the knife sheath, or that he touched something and the real killer touched the same object?
Yeah, the real killer would have to be either be wearing gloves to not be able to transfer their own DNA onto the object.
Right.
So, like I said, it's really hard for it to just magically appear there. The only other logic is somebody knew he had that style knife or where he kept it. Maybe he showed off about it, and maybe they got upset with him and took it out of his house. But it would have to be somebody close to him, and we haven't heard that he had any friends that were close to him that would come over to his house.
Right. No, I understand that. So, and he, like you said, he was being by himself. I think that Probably somebody, touching the same object, and it just so happened to be Bryan Kohberger's unluckiest day, and that his DNA got transferred on to the actual killer. What are the chances that his DNA is going to transfer onto the killer, happens to drive a white Elantra, and commits the murder during the time when Kohberger's phone is off?
And that is going to be a very small chance. It would have to be somebody stalking him to know the exact times he would do certain things. So, I don't know. To me, there's no chance.
Yeah, I think that the chances are astronomical. So it's to me it's astronomical. I don't think it would make sense. So let's go to the let's just talk about the frame job then. Because everything is pointing in that direction. Who would be doing the frame job? Do you think that would be the police department, or do you think that would be the frat guys? Do you think that would be the killer himself? Who's framing Kohberger?
I don't think it'd be the frat guys that got in the fight, because they didn't even go to the same school as him. They wouldn't have been his students, I think.
Right.
Unless they transfer, like go from one school to the other, depending on what classes or courses they're taking. Which I know some places do that.
Right.
I don't know about up there. And then the other thing would be the police. I doubt it, because the FBI was there, and for them to risk, the FBI catching them, and then, it's their life on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, so the first question comes up when it comes to the frame job is, when did they decide to frame Bryan Kohberger? It had to have been before the murder if they plant DNA. Now, who's doing the frame job? If it's police department, then they would have been responsible first, right? If it's the somebody connected to somebody in the police department, it would have to be something like that, right? Now, like we said earlier, the FBI are who basically served Bryan Kohberger on a platter. Do you think the FBI are going to go into it and say, all right, we'll cover up this for this crooked cop, so that way, the University of Idaho don't lose money? I don't think so. It's a small town city, small town police, small time cop. I don't understand why anybody would try to risk their career or their freedom for something like that from a bigger level, from the agency. So it would have had to have happened before, because what happens when evidence is collected? And I know you got to get going, so you can jump off whenever you have to. But
yeah, it would get sealed in a evidence bag that's got tapes and initials and times, and to tamper with that, I mean, they would have been in the paperwork. Evidence was tampered with, and that would lose a case.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. So I'll talk about the procedures real quick. So what's going to happen is the knife is going to be located. The knife is going to be securely picked up and placed in a, typically it's a box, and it's zip tied to the box. Inside of the box, everything is sanitized. Everything is clean. And on the outside of that box is tape. And alongside that tape, you sign your name, right? And then it goes off. Now, I went to the Idaho State Lab, which I believe is in Boise, Idaho. Where are they putting the DNA on the knife? It's not while it's in. Could it be while it's in transit? Well, somebody would have to break that seal, and it would have to be the person that signed off, so that they can put their signature back on.
Yeah.
Right. And if if Idaho or the state Idaho lab is getting a knife sheath or a box and the seal is broken, they don't just say, "Oh no, we're going to risk our jobs, lives, freedom because somebody opened this somewhere else along the way. No, that's going to be reported right away. Now, where is it stored? It's stored behind it's in a locked facility that only the evidence guys are allowed to go back and forth in. So the officers aren't really allowed to go back there. Right now, if they have a reason to go back there, or they need to look at stuff, then usually they're accompanied by an evidence tech. Right, and there's also cameras all around, and it's recording 24/7. So, it's not like 1995 Glock movie where you can go into the evidence room, take out a gun, go use that gun in a crime, and then go put it back. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's not like that no more. That was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So it would have had to have been planted by the cops before the murders or after the murders. So they would have had to have had reason. And for them to also have his DNA on hand, they would have definitely had to have known or framed him. Right. And like I said, where's it happening? Also, the knife sheath's already been seen before Sergeant Payne gets there. So it had to have been, the officers that first responded, maybe, or an officer that did it that night. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense logically. The frame job doesn't make sense at all. There's opportunity. When did it happen? When did they have access to Bryan Kohberger's DNA? And then I even heard that he was getting kicked out of his school as a teacher's assistant at the same time that all this, was happening, was because of his political beliefs. I mean, the guy is there just a few months, and he's got the police department framing him and the school framing him. And where does it stop? The state of Idaho, the Idaho State Police, or not the Idaho State Police, the Idaho State Lab framing him. Pennsylvania is also framing him. They're lying about things. Like the FBI knows that it's all a scam and it's a sham, and they're framing him as well.
Yeah. I laugh.
So kind of just put it all together then. So the most logical explanation is that Bryan Kohberger, turned his phone off because his battery was dying. And during that time of the murders, somebody else committed the murders driving a vehicle that looked like his because they were framing him. Right. Yeah. They planned this from the beginning. They stole the vehicle because you have to use another person's car. Right. And then they planted the sheath. They planted the DNA. They committed the perfect crime 4 times without leaving any evidence of themselves, but yet managed to also leave evidence of somebody else. And they knew, and this is why this is part of the frame job, they knew that Bryan Kohberger was going to be driving around that night by himself with his phone off. And at what time his phone was going to be off and at what time his phone was going to come back on. That's what needs to happen for that. We had a comment, the last time when we talked about this, where somebody said, those that think that Kohberger's innocent, aren't that stupid. You make them see when you put the story together that has to take place for Bryan Kohberger to be innocent. And my response is that's kind of how it sounds. When somebody comes up and says, could have touched the doorknob. He could have touched the doorknob. That's how his DNA got there. But don't explain the white car, the phone being off, him being around there 12 different times. Like they skip all those things and point at one thing and just say, he could have touched the doorknob. He could have picked up a knife somewhere. He could have done this. And for those that are thinking big picture, we have to put that piece to the puzzle and say, all right, if he touched the doorknob, that means that the person who also touched the doorknob drives a vehicle that's just his, just so happened to leave his DNA and not, leave Kohberger's DNA, but not his own. Drives the same car. Knew Kohberger's phone was going to be off, or was just that lucky that his phone was going to be off.
Yeah.
And folks will come up with just one explanation, like the DNA or 20,000, Elantras in the area or whatever. Yeah, there's 20,000 Elantras, but how many of those people that were driving, that drive Elantras have admittedly said that they were out and about that night? How many of them, were their phones off? They can't prove where they were at. Things like that. It boils. It kind of everything check marks when it comes to Kohberger. You know what I'm saying? I don't see where it doesn't. I'm gonna go through some of these starred comments, and then we'll. I know if you got to go, Blue, it's all good.
All right. Yeah, peace out, guys. Take care.
Yeah. So Heather came with a member for 8 months. Whoever had it had a lot of rage. We talked about that. I was driving around. Anyone who thinks he's 100% innocent or 100% guilty without 100% of the evidence should step back and take an emotional feelings out and take another look. Yeah, to a certain extent, I agree to that. I honestly think that the evidence is there that says that he more than likely did it. I personally won't say, without 100%, without seeing all the evidence. I think that it's going to be there. One of the explanations, for instance, or one of the biggest things that I hear an objection, for instance, on the times that Bryan Kohberger was out there and locations, is that those locations aren't accurate. Well, we know only the fact that they had those locations at the time of the arrest. After his arrest, they put out warrants for his phone to get his locations by GPS. Those things are a lot more accurate than what triangulation that you were speaking of. And I feel that if it came out that it was somehow exculpatory for Bryan Kohberger, for instance, those 12 times were, at the mall or at the restaurant based off his GPS locations, I think we would have heard about that. That would have been in one of the many defense memorandums or court documents that they have supplied. If they want that thrown out or whatever the case may be, explain this like they had the 3 unidentified male DNAs. They were pretty specific with one, saying it was inside of a glove outside of the house, and not very specific about the other 2, just so that they were in the area of where the murders occurred. It could have been across the room. There was 150 people there the night before. The DNA that was found, on the bodies or underneath the bodies was the one of Bryan Kohberger's. And Mikey also gifted a Drunk Turkey membership. Thank you, Mikey. We appreciate you. Seeing you back on the live. Iron Range Rubes comes on the $5 super chat. Says, if anybody thinks that these kids were moving major weight, they have mashed potatoes for brains. I don't know this with you. Patty Riddle says $4.99 with a super sticker. Thank you. We appreciate that. Nolo says, thanks for being real. Looking forward to your upcoming show with Ashton Forbes. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. If you guys aren't aware who Ashton Forbes is, he is a guy that has top security clearance. We're going to be talking about these 3 UFOs that circled around an airplane and made it disappear, apparently. And there's been some footage that's been released. Ashton Forbes has security clearance and has knowledge in cameras and things like that. And so he thinks it's real. We're going to talk about it. We're going to show the footage and break it down, the whole 9 yards. And so that's coming up next Wednesday. Also, next Friday, we're going to be doing something different. We're going to start a new thing on Fridays, or it's going to be Ask the Turkeys. We're going to be opening up the phone lines, and you can ask us questions about anything. We think, relationships, work, whatever you want. Just get on the phone line, talk to us. We'll give you drunken turkey advice you probably shouldn't listen to. And then, call, have a good time with that. So I'm looking forward to that. That's what's going to be starting next week. All right, I read that one. If BK is innocent, why not put him on the stand? I mean, yeah, I get that. If he is innocent, then why not put him on the stand? I mean, you can't. some people, maybe they just look guilty. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't fault anybody for that. You know, if my family member was in the same predicament, you know, if there was something that could prove that they were innocent, obviously I'd say, hey, you know, go out there and say what you got to say to prove that you're innocent. Like if you were with somebody, or you bought something at a store, or you're purchasing something illegal, it's probably better to get, you know, a charge for that than a charge for murder. Right. So, you know, there would be evidence of you being where you say you were. You know, surveillance is everywhere nowadays. So, you know, there would be, even if it wasn't like, for instance, per se where you're at, but you're going to come across traffic cameras, you're going to come across security surveillance cameras from businesses that are capturing your car driving to that area, showing that you're going in that direction that you state you're going. There'd be evidence. But if there was no alibi, everything kind of looked at that this person was guilty, I would tell my family member probably not to take it too. Let's see. Throw in your theories or your comments now that I'm looking actually at the live chat, so that I can keep in with it. So, like I said, the story that has to be made to account for everything, the phone, the DNA, the his car being off, or his car being seen in the area, all those just kind of looks in one way. Just looks one way. We didn't talk about the secret tunnels in Moscow. You know, I don't know much about them, other than I know that there's tunnels in most places. You know, if you have manhole covers, there's a tunnel in the street, right? Somehow, some way. Hi. They didn't need evidence just to talk to him. That is true. They didn't need evidence just to talk to him. But, you know, you also don't want this guy to run. You don't want this guy to flee or hurt somebody else in the process. So when you have somebody who's taken the lives of 4 people, you're going to want to arrest that person as soon as possible before somebody else gets hurt. By the court, not public. I'm not sure what that's referencing. Eventually, they would have found him. He was taunting on social media about hiding in the woods. I don't know if that was him, but I do think they would have eventually found him. Eventually, word's going to get back to someone about his behavior at WSU, how he was treating females and how he was treating female teachers, things like that. There's been documented history at WSU of his behavior, not just from the school, but also from students at the school. So I think that at a certain time, somebody's put 2 and 2 together and say, hey, you know, Bryan Kohberger has got these issues, and he also drives a white Elantra, you know, calling in as a tip, whatever. Okay, just look at the guy. You don't need anything to investigate somebody. You know, somebody can just say, hey, you know, I had a dream that the person that killed this guy, or the person that killed these 4 victims was Bryan Kohberger. You can't use that in trial. You know, that person's not going to stand, you know, in the court and say, hey, you know, I had a dream and that's why we looked at him. You know, that's called a hunch. And so it's not admissible and can't be used against him, which is kind of similar to the IGG stuff. You know, it's just saying, hey, you might want to look at this guy. It doesn't stop anybody from investigating, or any law enforcement agent from investigating somebody. I know that there's been some talk about, well, you know, what if FBI violated policy and started the IGG process before they ran out or exhausted all of their lead before, you know, because of their policy stating that basically there can't be any suspects. If you have a suspect, you have, you know, still things that can be investigated. You can't, they don't do the IGG. What people are failing to understand is that's FBI policy. That's not state law. That's not federal law. So just because, you know, somebody goes and does something early, even if that's the case, doesn't mean that the case is thrown. It just means you can't use that evidence against that person. which the prosecution wasn't going to use that evidence against him to begin with. So kind of like I've been saying this entire time, it's a futile point. It's stupid, honestly. But, they're not using it. It's not used. And so this doesn't make any sense to me is why, they think that there's some kind of big deal when it comes to it. Because at the end of the day, Bryan Kohberger's DNA matched to by an STR profile from a buccal swab that he had a warrant for from his cheek. And that's the DNA that they're using against him in court, not the IgG. So anybody come in, I mean, one person asked me in a chat session, is there a way that somebody can get evidence against somebody that police cannot investigate it? And the answer is no. I mean, you can find out that, Bill is assaulting a little girl, and that little girl's father finds out, beats the crap out of Bill, right? He then goes to the police department and tells the police department, hey, this guy was assaulting a little girl and I beat the crap out of him. He's over here, but he's not dead. He's just beating the crap out of him. Does that mean that police can't go over there and arrest him or investigate the child predator? Absolutely not. They're going to say, hey, you're a victim of an assault. You press charges against this person. But while we're at it, what were you doing on this day or that day? Or what is your relationship with this person or that person? You can still investigate this guy. There's nothing saying you can't. So I really don't see where throwing in the IgG works. In fact, the IgG pointed at Bryan Kohberger. So it points to Bryan Kohberger's guilt. The STR profile basically certified that the IgG was correct and it was done accurately. Because if it was done incorrectly, then Bryan Kohberger's DNA wouldn't have matched to the DNA on the sheath. Right? So the fact that it did means that it was correctly done. So this is literally like as if Bryan Kohberger took a lie detector test and failed it. And his defense team thinks that it is a good idea to have evidence of a lie detector test that says he's lying, that isn't admissible in court, be used in court. I don't know where the strategy there is. It makes no sense. Let me go ahead and throw this stuff that says I'm guilty, that they can't use against me, and have it available so that they can use it against me. Doesn't sound like the smartest play to me. When you break it down to actually what it is that they're arguing. Because at the end of the day, that sheath and that DNA on that sheath was matched to his cheek. And what they used to get that warrant for that DNA was in the probable cause affidavit. And if you look at the probable cause affidavit, there isn't any mention of the IgG being used against him. They talk about DNA matching to his father. There's no talk about Othram. There's no talk about the FBI lab doing an IgG stuff. Right? That stuff's not there. Why? Because they're not using that against him. When it came to his father's DNA testing against, matching up, that wasn't from the IgG. That has nothing to do with the IgG. What they did was they had DNA on the sheath. They got the idea that Bryan Kohberger could have been the guy. And they found out where he was at, that he was in the Pocono Mountains with his family. They went out there and pulled trash to try to find his DNA in there. But he was putting his trash in separate baggies, remember? Taking it out of the trash. Maybe he was putting it back in after he put a little bit of bleach in there and shook it up. I don't know. That's speculating on my part. But, he was taking his trash out. They pulled trash. They couldn't find his DNA, but they found DNA that matched up to the suspect's father. Well, that was enough to get an arrest warrant. It's not enough to prosecute the guy. They have to get an actual warrant for the match confirmation. So the police or law enforcement picking up trash, discarded trash to match to Bryan Kohberger's father had zero to do with the IgG, nothing to do with it. And so, let me go through some more of these real quick. Do you think Kohberger deliberately asked, was anyone else arrested as a ploy? No, I think that he drove back with his father across country, and maybe perhaps that he thought maybe they would be arresting his dad for assisting. Let me see. BK is so guilty. He was so close to getting away with it. He really messed up leaving the knife sheath. I'm sure he regrets every single day in his jail cell. Probably so. But like I said, I think that eventually he would have gotten caught because his phone, once they would have gotten track of him, let's just say it would have been from somebody across, from WSU reporting him, or even if it was them going, all right, we're going through one by one all of these 20,000 Elantras or whatever the case may be. And then they finally do cross Bryan Kohberger, because I don't think that they were aware of Kohberger, even though they had his name November 29th. There was a lot of tips coming in. There were a lot of people they were talking to. There was a lot of people that were investigating early on in this case, including the 2 surviving roommates, the ex-boyfriend, a lot of the friends that they had, the person that called 911. So there's a lot of stuff going on at that same time. So, eventually I think they would have gotten to that tip. Eventually they would have gotten to his citation with his phone number, and eventually they would have been able to have seen that his phone was off during that time, and they still would have had the information that was clearly available, like his WSU, or not WSU, but his accomplishments at DeSales University and at Northampton University or college, and what he was doing at WSU. He also had, the same, his essay or whatever it was that he wrote, for his, for the intern job. So all that would have still been there, right? The only thing that they wouldn't have had is his DNA to put him there. And I think it would have been tough. It would have been a much tougher case to prove that it was him without it. Like I said, if it was just the DNA alone, I think that there's no case to arrest him. But because you have the phone being off, the activity, you have the car, you have the DNA, it kind of wraps it up, right? Let's see. BK gave the knife away. I mean, he's a PhD criminology major. His goal is to eventually be in some sort of fashion involved in law enforcement. Don't you think that if he had a K-bar knife, they were asking about K-bar knives, that if he gave it away and that person also drives a Elantra like his, that he wouldn't have reported that? Given his, who he is, what you expect out of him, given his field of study. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of where that comes into play. Let's see. There's some Bundy talk. They had thousands of opportunities to get BK DNA, but for the investigators, it was better to travel to Pennsylvania and look for DNA in a trash can full of contamination. Smarter. All right. Well, Nelly, the thing is, when did they come out with Bryan Kohberger's name? When was his name brought up as a suspect? Well, the IgG didn't come back until December 19th. Well, where was Bryan Kohberger December 19th? He was in Pennsylvania. So I assume they went to his house, on December 19th to see, to his apartment complex. I assume that they tried to, pull trash, but he'd already been gone for some time. And if the trash had already been picked up, and if he was putting his, DNA in baggies at his parents' house, can you imagine what he was doing at his own house to prevent DNA being out there? And I wouldn't be surprised if he was, if he bleached his trash can or bleached a bunch of things that were outside that belonged to his house. And we also know that he had been gone for at least 6 days, out in the elements, because they didn't have access to the inside of his house. They didn't have a warrant. So the only thing they had access to was the outside of his house. And I'm not sure how long touch DNA is going to last on the exterior of the doorknob and the elements when it's, days where it's snowing, cold, things like that. I'm not sure how long that lasts. So when they finally found out who he was already in the Pocono Mountains. See, that's the reason why they went out there. Let's see. And I know I got a couple of super chats. Let's see real quick. I'll answer those. Mikey S comes back. $5 super chat. Ellie would have been better suited to bring him in earlier, got an alibi on record, or asked for DNA then. Usually works that way. Standard operation procedure, no. Not necessarily. Not really, not at all. It depends on the information and the evidence that you have. If you have enough evidence to arrest him and charge this person, then you go ahead and do it. You don't have to bring him in. You only bring him in to talk and things like that if you need more. If you need a confession and things like that, if your case isn't strong. By arresting him at the time that they did tells me they have quite a bit of evidence, and it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. The fact that they didn't bring him in to question him should be an indicator of that. But I appreciate that. And like I said, I mean, you really don't have to. There's no. What's the saying go? There's a 1,000 ways to skin a cat or something like that. 100 ways. It's the same thing here. You know, you can do one thing. You can call him in. You can bring him in. You can question him before you actually put him in handcuffs and attempts to get him to confess. But I think police knew who they were dealing with. I think they knew they were dealing with a very smart individual. And I think they knew that it would probably be better suited if they arrested him. And he was aware that, you know, they got him. I don't know what the advantages of that or not is. But I mean, we can Monday morning quarterback it all we want. I just feel that it probably means they have a lot of good evidence against them. You should do a Bundy comparison show. There is a comparison or not. You know, Extreme Blonde, we did kind of talk about the comparisons between Bundy and BTK and a lot of other serial killers who have been caught throughout the years, whether it was ties to law enforcement, you know, issues, you know, the whole 9 yards. You know, with Bundy, I think it was the sorority girls that he attacked. You know, he kind of looks the same. You know, there's a lot of things there, but you know, for this situation, I think, you know, honestly, I think that the motive was, you know, try to outsmart them all. There's a lot of similarities between BTK and BCK. Yeah, I think so too. Let's see. Remember that documentary? They stated that it was hard to believe a white collar guy like Bundy could do such a thing. I remember his explosive side came out in trial. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's the other thing is a lot of folks are assuming that they know these people, whether it's Bryan Kohberger, the victims, the surviving victims, and that they know they wouldn't do this or wouldn't do that or were incapable of something. I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised what somebody's capable of doing. You know, you'd be very surprised. So let me see. I want to read a few more of these. I'm looking at this on a different screen, so it's a little bit different, and I'm not pulling them up here. All right. Let's see. Any thoughts of why they were allegedly no body cam videos of Kohberger's parents' rape? Well, where does a body cam usually go? The body cam usually goes right in your chest, right? Now, you have a quadruple homicide suspect. You're probably going in there swatted up. SWAT team doesn't have typically on your chest you have something there, whether it's a gun, whether it's a some sort of device. And I know this because I was actually SWAT, so I didn't have a body cam when I was there. And I mean, I wasn't in a big city or anything like, you know, what you see on TV. It was in a smaller area, but I certified in SWAT. I took the courses, took the class, went out there, got the whole 9 yards. And when it comes to that, you have to be very tactical, because you're going into a situation that can come out crazy, right? So I think that safety is something that is prioritized over cameras. Now, why didn't anybody have a camera or body cam? That's a little weird. I'll be honest, it's weird, but I don't know the answer to that. You know, is the answer that they decided to go in there without body cams because, you know, they also are in on the frame job? I mean, that's a pretty wild stretch. That's a pretty wild stretch. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't have it. You know, I like I said, I assume why the entry guys didn't have it, but why anybody didn't, that's weird. Let's see. Interview could have. Sorry, where'd it go? No, Ellie could have interviewed before he left for PA, just like they questioned all friends and still. That 8-hour, 10-hour wait for 911 call is sus. Daniel, you don't care about anyone else's thoughts. I do care about everybody's thoughts. I'm just answering your questions in the manner that that they're coming in. I mean, maybe not in the manner, just answering the questions when they come in. As far as interviewing him before he left to PA, they would have had to have known he was a suspect before then. The IGG didn't come back till December 19th. He left December 14th to PA. So, you know, unless there's some time travel involved, I'm not sure how they could have interviewed before he left for PA. You know what I'm saying? I'll tell you one thing, that vehicle's computer alone could have been the nail in the coffin. I believe they say you would have to turn on and off a vehicle hundreds of times to erase data. Maybe. I don't know how equipped his car was either. That would be able to determine that. But if it's in there, then yeah. Yeah. And I think they would have evidence of that. Now, when would they get the evidence of that? That evidence isn't coming to them until after Kohberger's arrest. You know, that's when they ended up going through the car and having the warrants for the car. So that's definitely something we wouldn't know about. You know, what information they have. It's a good comment there. Back then, I think for most people, it was harder to believe. Now, not so much. A more innocent time in the mid-'70s where everyone is expecting killers to look like Manson. Yeah. When someone is capable of doing doesn't mean that they do it. I agree. But you also have to say that if, you know, somebody has to be capable of doing it to do it, right? So are roid raged or raged individuals capable of committing a crime without, you know, showing any sign of rage? You know, no yelling. There's no signs of yelling from the audio next door. There isn't. The door wasn't kicked down. There was no sign of a forced entry. You know, when you have somebody who's not thinking right and on rage, you know, that's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, somebody has to be capable. And when it comes to this type of crime, I mean, there's only a few people that are capable of committing this type of crime with the experience and knowledge that you need. I think he's one of them. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's guilty. I just think that he falls in line with it. And when you look at all these individuals that fall in line, how many of them have a white Elantra without a front license plate on November 13th? You know, how many of them were their DNA found in the body of a victim? You know, how many of them did their phone turn off mysteriously during the time that the murders were occurring? So I think there's a lot of capable, you know, it's every box that he's capable of doing it. Is there anybody else that matches those boxes? Drives the Elantra, was in the area, or their phone was off? I don't know. Let's see. Another super chat. I want to pull it up here. Micro Kimmy comes in with a $5 super chat saying, on the selling or giving the knife away theory, who would buy or take a used knife in a town where unsolved quad homicide just happened? That's unlikely. Yeah, that's after the fact. Before the fact, if he, you know, gave his knife away to the real killer before the crimes that occurred, I find it very odd that he didn't come forward and report that. Again, what is his profession? What does he want to do? He wants to be in law enforcement. Somebody that wants to be in law enforcement there's some pretty suspicious behaviors if he was innocent that he wasn't doing. Right. One of them being reporting that he was out and about driving around that night because he had a white Elantra. Yeah, you can say they weren't looking for the right year, but come on now. You can't tell the difference between the two, especially at night. So you mean to tell me that he didn't know that his car could have been confused for that he was driving around that night, and he gave away a knife that they're kind of looking for? I mean, if there was something to explain all of that, you think he'd come forward and say, hey, this is where I was at. I know it looks bad, but this is what I was doing. It's not the case. He didn't come forward. It seems like he was hiding. And when you're hiding something, Daniel's hired if suspiciously croaked. If I suspiciously croak. Thank you, Iona. I appreciate that. Daniel's suspect number one if I croak. Appreciate that, Angel. You guys are funny. Very suspicious that no video of Bryan arrest or Brent incident. None. But those are two different departments, two different places in the world, two different incidences. I mean, just as, there's probably tons of situations throughout America where an officer didn't have video or like that happened. Does that mean that they're all connected in some kind of weird net of some sort? No, not at all. Not at all. And if there was something that tied Brent Kopeka to the case, they would use it. That would, kind of drop the pressure down a little bit off the fact that they took the life of somebody, right? Not only did you save the people that he was threatening to kill, but this person also killed 4 other people, just a month later. That's big news, right? And that's like, somebody would get a medal for that if they took down, that person. Not necessarily has to be like death, but arrested that person, or if they, if it came down to where they had to defend themselves or whatever the case. I haven't seen any of it, so I don't know any of the reasons why Brent Kopeka, why cops were there, or any of those things. Let's see. They don't have him in the car, and I know it. Why have they not released a single photo identifying him? They've released the 1 in 5 octillion chances that his DNA was underneath the body of a victim. Just because you can't see a picture of somebody in a car. I mean, Paula, does that mean that if somebody committed a crime against you, they would literally have to have video of it, live streaming while it was happening for you to believe that somebody committed that crime? Even if there's evidence that, let's just say it's, your neighbor stole something. It doesn't have to be something as tragic as taking anybody's life. And for a fact that it's him. Are you going to tell yourself, hey, yeah, this guy knew I was going to be gone during this time. This person knew where my stuff was at. This person knew whatever. And then you see him operating a tool similar to what he stole. All right. Are you going to tell yourself, well, I really didn't see him take it. There's no video, so he's definitely not the guy. I don't think so. Let's see. I won't believe that the white Elantra was his unless I see video proof. Like I said, again, if you need video proof of somebody committing a crime, nobody should be, the jail should be empty by half. Like, honestly. There's not video evidence of somebody committing a crime during the commission of the crime. And you don't necessarily have to have that to prove that somebody was doing something, or where were they at? Now, what do we do know? Bryan Kohberger was in his car that, and he was driving around based on his own alibi. And where was he picked up at? In Pullman and just south of Moscow. So why is it so hard to believe that he was on camera in those two areas in between that time? I don't get it. Doesn't make sense to me. Paul says he went out about his normal routine. How was he hiding? How is he having a normal routine? Why is that normal routine just automatically stop? Right? His normal routine is to go and, stalk some people and drive around and park in a specific area at weird hours of the night. And then it automatically just kind of stops after the murders. He's got nothing to do with it. You know, he was, I mean, how does him driving around at night put him in danger of somebody breaking into his car or any of those things to commit a murder against him? You know, I know a lot of people who say, oh, a lot of people change their habits after the murder, you know, okay. But, you know, how does the murder implicate him changing his pattern of driving, you know, 2 hours south, or, you know, turning his phone off and going into the boonies? Those don't happen after November 14th. It's interesting. It's just interesting, in my opinion. Oh, thank you, Neil, for gifting 20 drunk memberships. We appreciate that. If you guys got one, thank you so much. And Neil, if you want to grab one of these, make sure you turn your memberships on. Thank you. Thank you to all the new members and anybody that got one of those. And like I said, I mean, if there's something there that says he's innocent, or is exculpatory, or it says something that points to him not being the guy, I'll point it out. I mean, we can look at the Delphi case where Richard Allen is being accused of taking the lives of 2 little girls. And in that case, you know, I thought early on that it was signed, sealed, delivered. This guy put himself there, put himself in the clothes. He was there. You know, it's him. Now you got somebody saying, you know, it was them. Elvis Fields comes out saying some pretty weird things that kind of, you know, only maybe perhaps the killer would know. I stop and halt and say, hey, you know, there's something there. There's something there. You know, you can see that. Now, I'm not going to go in there and say, oh, everybody is connected and everybody is out to get Richard Allen, you know, the judge, the whole 9 yards. I don't think that's the case. You know, but is it possible that there was more to that case than what meets the eye or that we know? It's possible. And I'll shoot the arrow straight. And I'll tell you, hey, there's something weird there. And there's something weird there. We're talking about it. Over here, on this side, I mean, I know I get it, you know, drama sells and all this other stuff, and it creates, you know, you get more money and things like that, but it's not there. It's not there. It just really isn't there. And when you put it into like what all the evidence is, right? When you put on like any explanation, the white car, the DNA, whatever, you come up with your explanation for it. When you have to come up with the story that explains all the other evidence, it just makes that story sound and look real crazy. Know what I mean? Daniel refused to see any other side of this when many others do. No, it's not that I don't refuse to see the side. I was actually very much on, you know, possibility of Bryan Kohberger being innocent early on in this thing. The more evidence came out and more that I understood the probable cause data, which was written poorly, the more I see that it wasn't a situation like that. I'm actually the one that changed my mind. It is others who choose to continue drama and the conspiracy to it for whatever reason. You know, I'll say this: saying what I'm saying doesn't pay the bills. You know, if I were to go in there and stop videos or stop, you know, paperwork in the middle of the page and not go further down to show you the explanation from the prosecution and do all those things as well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you guys would eat it up. It is what it is. You know, like I said, I'll shoot it straight. It is what it is. People like drama. In the situation here, I'm not gonna go and belittle myself or put myself out there for money, clicks, and views, just, you know, and make people think that there's something there that's not. You know, like I said, I'm open to it. I'm very much open. But, you know, to say to me that, you know, Bryan Kohberger just accidentally touched something somewhere and that's how his DNA got there, and expect me to be like, okay, you know, that makes sense. He must be innocent, and not take into consideration the evidence around it is irresponsible. It's basically almost a lie and a failure to the public for what what they should be listening and hearing, because there's a lot of people out there right now who think that they're going to be seeing these victories from Kohberger, who are going to be very disappointed when it doesn't happen. And they come in here strong with these words saying, yelling the loudest, right? Yelling loudest saying, he's innocent, this and that. Just wait till this day. How many times have we had to wait for a day? Wait till Wednesday, wait till Monday, wait till the 28th, wait till that day. This person's really getting arrested. The real person that did it is getting arrested. How many days? How many days does that have to happen? Right? How many days? And probably say, I don't know that. What don't I know? Please come up with a story that explains why Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the sheath. A vehicle matching his is driving around in the middle of the night, around the time of the murders. Why his phone is off during the middle of the night, during the time of the murders. And why, perhaps we should throw this on. We haven't even talked about it. The K-bar knife that he purchased in April that can't be found. Let's put that together. And if you can come up with a story that's logical, that answers all of those questions, I'll put it out there. I really will. And I've asked people to do that. I've asked creators to do that who claim that they know the ins and outs of this case, and they can prove that Bryan Kohberger's innocent and this, that, and the third, or he didn't do it. The only thing that I keep seeing is the hope that something gets him off on a technicality. Not that he's innocent. Where's the argument that he's innocent? The argument is always the technicality aspect. It's a technicality issue. Like, oh, let's get him off on a technicality. That doesn't mean he didn't do it. That just means that, there's a good chance he did do it. And because of somebody else's mistake, you're cheering on the fact that a possible killer is out free to do it again. Just because your point was proven right. Because you thought at one point that he was innocent. And despite all the evidence that's been out there, you don't want to change it because then that would admit that you're wrong. I thought he was innocent at one point. I admitted I was wrong. I've admitted I was wrong several times. Because to me, it's about being, being right in the aspect of manipulating the information or manipulating the evidence that's out there to fit my narrative. It's about being correct and being truthful. Because if I'm in one of these family situations, if I was, Kaylee's father, hearing all this stuff and all this support for a guy who, the evidence points that he possibly did this. I get it, innocent and still being guilty, but, there are people cheering him on and egging it on like it's a freaking football game. You know what I mean? Like it's a freaking football game. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I mean, that's your opinion. You can have your opinion. You can do that. Just don't ask why people think that, some of these explanations for Bryan Kohberger, don't be surprised when people think that they're stupid or dumb. Not the person saying it, but the explanation is, because you can come back with, oh yeah, Bryan Kohberger may have touched the knife sheath at a garage sale, and that's how his DNA got there. And not add, all right, so if we're expected to believe that, then we're expected to believe the white car was just by coincidence. We're expected to believe that, his phone being off was just coincidence. Like, how many coincidences are we supposed to believe there? And so when somebody looks at the big picture and you're coming up with this one explanation that really doesn't make any sense when it comes down to the big picture of things. I don't see that people are doing it. The fact you getting upset that we have minds of our, I don't know. I'm not upset. Different is what's been going on set. I'm not upset at all. I just don't understand where you expect me to be open to stuff that pretty much can be proven not to be true. Like, come on now. Roid Rage is what did this, right? Somebody with Roid Rage and who's drinking alcohol, who was so angry, went over the edge and went and committed this crime, when did that fight happen? That happened that night. So when the hell did he get Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath and everything else, to get that going beforehand, right? And given everything else, the white car, the no front license plate, Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. So we're supposed to believe that the fraternity guys somehow had Bryan Kohberger's DNA already and decided to frame him, and they knew they held off because they knew that if they went and committed this crime at 3, it would be obvious that it was them, and they held off till whatever time while Bryan Kohberger's phone was off, because whatever reason you want to come up with, it doesn't sound stupid. Because to me, I can't come up with one that doesn't. And I'm not trying to be mean or rude or any of those things. It's just the fact. Like the reason and actually believe that reason when you look at the big picture, it's hard. And when you look at Richard Allen, you got somebody saying, hey, I may have committed, I committed that crime. I'm going away for a while. I put horns on her. And some of those things end up coming out true. Then, hey, yeah, you got something there. And am I supposed to be anti-cop in that situation and and pro-cop in this one? Those things don't make sense. Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to go up a few bits to see what I'm missing here. All right. I know Daniel was thinking it was him at first. Not at first. Whoever said he don't want to see both sides doesn't want to see both sides of themselves. I wasn't thinking at first. I thought that there was a chance that he didn't do it. And I was all over everything about, the pings 27 miles away, DNA, this, that, and a third. And I'll tell you when my mind changed. My mind changed when, I found out that the Idaho State Lab actually did detect a profile, an STR profile in the sheath, and created a profile to compare to. According to Howard Bloom, he had stated that the DNA that was on the sheath was so small that they couldn't find it, that it had to be sent to a lab somewhere to develop it. I thought that's bull. That's not going to fly with me. That don't fly with me. But that's not what happened. When I found out that's not happened, my decision changed. When I found out that the Idaho State Lab did detect the profile, did create one, and that Bryan Kohberger's DNA did match it from a direct STR comparison, or direct comparison from his DNA to the STR profile. That was the first big thing that said, all right, it was him. All right. The phone being off and this and that. I even said it then. I was like, the one thing that, throws me off, even then when I said that I was like 50-50, the one thing that tells me that he probably did it, though, was his phone being off during the time of the murders. I've always said that was suspicious. Just like I'm saying that Elvis Fields' comments in Delphi are suspicious. Right. 22,000 white Elantras. Yes, Paula, but how many of those people that drive Elantras in that area, how many of them had their DNA under the body of a victim? How many of them don't have a front license plate? How many of them also turned off their phones throughout the middle of the night? And how many of them do we know that they were actually out and about driving around because of their own statements? I mean, like I said, again, you put out one thing, singularly focused on one side without putting the big picture. Please put the big picture. I'm begging you at this point to put the big picture so we can see it. And I'm not saying, we're going to point and laugh or do those things, but I mean, put the picture and we'll see what happens. I'm going to have to call in with my theory. He planted the only clue. He planned it and there was, and was there, but didn't do it. It's a great show. I can say that the possibility that it was somebody else and Bryan Kohberger is innocent to me is almost zero. The possibility of somebody else being involved, I think, is a little bit greater. I don't think somebody else involved. That's not what I think, but I do say that there is a greater chance of that happening versus him not being involved at all. The phone also returned to the area of the crime scene around 9:15 a.m. on November 13, about 5 hours after the stabbings, before they had been reported to the police. Right. Exactly. And what all do we know about what had occurred that night? We know that his phone turns off at 2:44 in the morning. You know, I wonder what his activity was before then. Was he asleep? Was he up? Was he awake? Had he been awake all day? Right? Had he been up since 10 o'clock in the morning? If that's the case, then he was up from 10 o'clock to 2:45 a.m. when his phone turned off. And by his own admission, he was driving around at night, and when his phone came back on, it was 5:30 something. Or when he got back to Pullman, it was 5:30 something. So if he was up from 10 a.m., right, up all day, up all night, commits the, then possibly commits the murders, drives around for an hour, and then a few hours later is back there, and then a couple of hours after that is a little over an hour south in Clarkston, Washington, and he's out there driving around, and then he ends up not getting back home till 8:30. So, I mean, I don't know. That sound like I said, Bryan Kohberger looks like a guy that's gotten healthier, thicker. His cheeks aren't as sunk in since being in prison. There's only like two types of folks that get healthier in prison when they go in there. It's people that are obese and people that were on something that are no longer have access to those things. I'm not saying he was on anything. I have no idea. But if he did commit this crime and he was up throughout that entire time, adrenaline kicking in, no crash after that. I don't know. Maybe he just drinks a lot of coffee. 3 Elantras on the road at 4 a.m. Where do you have that at? I'm not sure where you found that there's 3 Elantras on the road at 4 a.m. There's no. Where's that from? 8 hours before the 911 call. I'm guilty people to be in jail. I can't answer the 8 hours before the 911 call. I honestly don't know. Does it look suspicious? Yeah. Is it? Are they going to have to answer for it? Yeah. Yeah. Does that necessarily mean that they're involved in this? I mean, when you look at what police did to investigate them, they downloaded their phones, they heavily interrogated them. I don't think that it's something that's going to end up being what you expect. There are certain people who are book smart, and there are certain people street smart. There's certain people that panic when things go crazy and they don't know what to do, and they do the wrong things. And there's a good possibility that that's what happened in this situation. Let's see. Let's continue. 22,000 white Elantras. How many without a front license plate, which required in Idaho? Yeah. All right. There is a theory that he left the sheath on purpose, just thought he had cleaned it completely and missed the insights. I don't think so. I mean, is it possible? I guess. I don't see what the point would be to leave the sheath behind. If this was Kohberger, right? And this is an if. We know that there was a dicky tag for coveralls, that the coveralls are missing, right? They can't be found. If it's the coveralls that I'm thinking of, which I don't know which ones they are, but if it is, they don't have a belt loop, so you can't properly put on a knife sheath while wearing those. So is it possible that the reason he went in there with the knife sheath in hand is because he doesn't want to, well, one, he doesn't have access or an ability to put it on his waist, and two, he doesn't want to have it exposed while he's going in there or anything like that, because sharp blade, you can cut yourself. You're not going to want to pull that out until the last moment. All right. You're not anticipating anybody being open. You're not anticipating, running into somebody. You've passed by like 5 or 6 times already. You've seen the lights turn off. You know how long they've been off upstairs. Probably not anticipating meeting anybody right away. Are you prepared for it? Yeah. You probably have the knife in one hand, the sheath in one hand, and then not the other in case somebody comes out and you walk in prepared. But if you have it just out and you accidentally prick yourself while you're walking up the stairs in the dark, it gives you up pretty quick. So you go in there with the sheath, so that way, you don't hurt yourself. You don't prick yourself. Same thing when you're leaving that area. That's why you take it in there. Now adrenaline kicks in, tunnel vision kicks in. He forgets about it. BTK forgot about a gun at one of the things. Right? I don't think it ever was an intention of his. Please like and subscribe. Yeah, if you're still watching that, yeah, please like, please subscribe. We'd appreciate it. Let's see. Who is HJ? HJ, I think, is Hunter Johnson. PA only requires one license plate and requires front and back. Yeah, PA only gives you one license plate. So it's not even just a requirement. You only have access to one. All right. Thanks, Ida, but can you see that no plate is in front of the car? There's a screenshot of the 1112 King Road residence that has been out there. You can see the intersection there, King Road and Queen Road, and you can see the vehicles coming up that road. You can, at night, you'll be able to see the reflection of the license plate. So yeah, you can tell that this vehicle does not have a front license plate. Nick again says, according to AAA, 61% of cars currently on the road do not have a front license plate, even though 29 states require them. Now, but like, where's the population of those that don't require them, right? Like, you know, Pennsylvania, like for instance, 29 states that do require them. Are they rural areas? You know, you're looking at, you know, smaller areas, rural areas that require them. I know Texas requires them. You know, Texas has a couple of cities that are big, but the land and the amount of space that's out in Texas, the population isn't that big. You know, when you go look at, like, for instance, some of these other places where it's not required, are they in bigger cities and stuff like that? Population is. I mean, you can see the discrepancy when it comes to voting, right? When you look at the rural areas and things like that, you might have some folks that vote a certain way, and it appears that, you know, when you look at the state, that, you know, if it's one color for the most part, and then it's another color in a small area, but that area has more population. So just because, you know, the percentages are there doesn't mean that in that specific area in Moscow, Idaho, that 61% of cars in that area don't have front license plates. So I think that those numbers are, even if they're accurate, they're not a true indication of that specific area. Law enforcement were looking for an Elantra with no front license plate. That's how the security guard found us at WSU. Now they looked up cars that were registered to WSU, and that's how they found it. By the time that they came up across Bryan Kohberger's car, he had already had Washington license plates. Let's see. Yeah, and I still can't to add Cammie. She was on the wrong list. To add her back, I need her to comment that I can add her, or she needs to send me her her profile name so I can add her back. Let's see. I just haven't seen her comment. Now that I'm focusing on it, it'd be good. Let me see. Seat that has an SQ number on it. It wouldn't be hard to find what item it is connected to. While they may not say coveralls, they know exactly what item it is. Well, they have the tags, and they also have, I think, a receipt for it. So, yeah, I think they would be able to figure out which kind they were. From surveillance, knew when people went to work, and that was the amount of time there was to commit a crime. I don't understand, Leroy. From surveillance knew when people went to work, and that's the amount of time there was to commit the crime. 10 hillbillies walk into a ballet, late but here. Good to see you, Mountain Mama. Good to see you. All right. Let's see. I'm going to answer a few more. Law enforcement didn't release a photo of the car without the license plate. Now, law enforcement didn't release a photo of the actual car either. They just released stock photo images of an Elantra. So I don't know. I really don't hold a lot of weight into that. What photos were out there, what they had, whether one had a sunroof, one didn't have a sunroof, front license plate, no front license plate, rims, hubcaps. I really don't look into that because it's dark. It's grainy footage. A lot of it's from ring footage. So you can tell from the Linda Lane footage and from the 1112 screenshot, there are cars parked, not even moving, right in front of the cameras. And because it's nighttime, you can't tell what the license plates are. What the numbers are. Tennessee doesn't require front license plates. Good deal. A lot of cars in 2-plate state only have 1 plate. I know for a fact 1-plate Idaho is not rare at all. It may not be, but when you add the fact that there's 1-plate car plus his DNA plus his phone being off plus him missing a K-bar knife that's now missing. Like, it's not just the car. And that's what I'm talking about. When it comes to, support for Bryan Kohberger, it comes in at without looking at how the evidence fits with the entire picture. It's just one single thing. It's kind of like if I were to go tell everybody, the sky is orange just because at 6:00 at night right now, it's turning orange at that one specific time. Doesn't mean that the sky is orange all the time. And there's other explanations for what the color is of the sky because, the way the light hits certain things, right? So there's reasons and stuff like that. So you can't just look at it, that one small, minute thing and say, oh, the sky is always orange because right now in this moment, it's orange. Doesn't work that way. You got to look at the entire picture. To me, jumping down rabbit holes of speculation really get us nowhere, in my opinion. I agree. I like talking facts presented in the PCA, IGG, and building my own conclusion around that. Yeah, 100%. What if one of the girls knocked the knife case out of his hand and he couldn't find it? I mean, that's a possibility. That occurred. I think that, in my opinion, what I think happened was he entered the rear sliding glass door. The rear sliding glass door remained open the entire time. We have there's a clip, and I have it in one of my other YouTube videos, where Steve Fry says that the rear sliding glass door was still open when officers arrived. All right, so I think that some folks might say, all right, well, maybe that's where Hunter Johnson entered. Well, I have reason to believe that Hunter Johnson was right next door. I believe his girlfriend lived there. For him to get to the rear sliding glass door, he would have to jump the back fence. I think that if he got the call saying, hey, something weird happened last night, we can't get them to answer, can you come over? He's running out his front door, and the fastest way into that house there is the front door of that house. He goes upstairs, he opens the door, gets the door open, manages to open the door, sees what he sees and says to get out, and 911 is called, and they all exit to the front of the house. Nobody ever exits the back. So when police arrive there and the back sliding glass door is there, it's still open. All right. So I think that Bryan Kohberger entered the sliding glass back door, left it open the entire time. He never touched it again. He went upstairs, and we know that there's audio next door. It doesn't pick up screams or any of those things, but it's loud enough to wake up Dylan because she wakes up at 4:00 per the PCA. The PCA also says that around that time, the only person that's also awake in that house is Xana Kernodle based on her phone, situation. Now, I think that perhaps she hears maybe some of the commotion that Dylan is hearing, or maybe perhaps she feels the draft of that back sliding glass door being open and she walks to the room, right? Because her dad had just fixed the locks, right? Her dad just fixed the locks, and I think they self-locked. So she walks to the room, leaves the door open. Ethan's still asleep. Walks towards the kitchen, sees the rear sliding glass door, says, I think someone's here. Dylan thinks that that's Kaylee Goncalves because her bedroom is right above her room. Xana's bedroom is down the hall, down the street. If you were to hear somebody using, a certain tone, right, a certain loudness, you might assume that person is coming from the nearby bedroom, not from somebody from way down the hall, not thinking that person may have exited the room and walked out there to, towards the kitchen, right? So I think that she comes out there, she sees the rear sliding glass door, maybe even hears a commotion, says somebody's here. I think Bryan Kohberger hears that. I think he comes down the staircase behind Xana as she's going back to her room to alert her boyfriend that something's up, and he surprises her from behind. He's probably one swing kind of thing in the right spot, so that yelling can't be heard, because the audio does not pick up any yelling. Doesn't pick up screaming, doesn't pick up, pounding or the sound of heels hitting the floor. None of those things. So in my opinion, that first blow had to be incapacitating blow. At that point, maybe Ethan does wake up. But at that point, you have a 6 foot, 200, and I don't know how much he weighs, 210, 220 pound man armed with a 7-inch knife in his hand over you while you're laying down there. That's not the greatest position in the world to be in. A couple of boom, boom to the chest and to the lungs. You're not going to be able to scream. You're not going to be able to yell. You're not going to be able to fight back. Right. That's why, and that's what accounts to the lack of noise that we're hearing. 2 of the girls upstairs were asleep. One of the victims on the second floor was asleep, and the third and the fourth one was attacked by surprise from behind. And that's why he was able to enter that room without it locking as well. So, I mean, that's my theory as to like how it went down there. Maybe perhaps he does hear somebody yell something. Maybe he hears Dylan say, something, but he's in the moment, right? Like, how many times have you been working on something and you're just focused in on that one specific thing, and then somebody says something to you? Do you pick it up right away? Or are you saying, what? Can you say that again? Especially if they haven't like grabbed your attention, right? Like they didn't say your name. They didn't say, hey, they just said something. Even if it's shut up, if it's 2 words, right? You're not prepared for it. So he may have just heard somebody yell and assumed that that person is calling 911, and he had to get out of there. He knew how far the police department was. We know that because his vehicle is captured on surveillance on the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive, which is right behind the police station. So he knows how far it is and how quick police would be, which is why he's taking off at a high rate of speed. Right now, he goes outside, probably takes off his clothes, so that way he does track more blood into his car, or track blood into his car. Maybe has a change of clothes. Now, what do we know? There's a footprint that's inside the house. That's a van's print. Vans have, what do you call it? Slip-on shoes, right? So those will be very easy to take off. If he's wearing coveralls and it's just a zipper, it's not that hard to take off. I mean, how long does it take to slide shoes and unzip a zipper? A couple of seconds, maybe 10 at the most. So, if he's putting on some warmers and a shirt and another pair of slip-on shoes, how long is that going to take him to get back undressed? And if his clothes can just be bundled up into a bag real quick, I mean, he's literally getting there very quickly with a brand new change of clothes into a car where it's less likely that he's going to leave DNA behind. He has 7 weeks to clean it. So even if there is something there, he can clean it throughout that time. And as we looked up before, bleach only lasts 24 hours. So after that, it dissipates and there's no sign of it being there. So that's kind of like where everything, in my opinion, kind of fall in line. I hope it all makes sense. Just me, different just me says, problem with the sheath is it's a movable object. That's the only DNA. It doesn't necessarily prove he was present. Unlike, say, his blood, etc., on the wall, door, light switch. I think the DA will argue this. Yeah, I agree with you. But if that was the only thing that had him there, right? If that was the only evidence that they had against him, yeah. But the thing is, it's DNA, the car, his phone, off, everything else. So it's bundled up together. It's like a combo meal, right? It's not just the fries, it's not just the soda that make the meal. It's the whole thing. Let's see. She did comment a bunch. I'm fine now. I just can't imagine. Like, that is my point. Thought someone killed him. I ran outside. Did call a friend before 911. Well, I doubt you're the real Bethany. Let's see. Roid Rage's ridiculous take. No offense to the pro burgers. I agree. I just don't think that there is that the evidence doesn't match Roid Rage or a rage incident, period. Collective evidence. Yeah, it's a collective evidence. Why is there no other DNA? Well, I'll answer that with, if there was DNA left here behind, right, that would be, where would you more likely think you'd find DNA left behind? Would you think that there'd be more likely DNA left behind on the body of victims who had their life taken by a knife in close proximity by the assailant? Or do you think that it'd be more likely to find DNA in a car of the victims after 7 weeks of possible cleaning? I think that there would be more unlikely an opportunity to find the blood things on the victims' bodies. Now, we didn't find it. Regardless, if you take the knife sheath, it didn't happen. So that doesn't mean that, this murder didn't happen. Obviously, 4 people had their lives taken with a knife. Somebody had to do it, right? So why isn't there, other DNA from other people? This means that's, from the real killer. Like, there's none. So that means that the person that committed this crime probably had knowledge on how not to leave their DNA behind and how not to take DNA with them, right? And Bryan Kohberger has that knowledge. Not saying he did it. Doesn't mean he did it. There's a lot of people that have that knowledge. But do those people that have that knowledge drive a white Elantra without a front license plate? Do they have their DNA under the bottom of the body of a victim? Did their phone was off during the commission of the crime? Yeah. Let's see. Maybe they were shocked by the bodies. And that's the other thing. It's been documented and talked about from the chief of police that their new officers and even experienced law enforcement officers had to go see psychiatric help after this to deal with what they saw. If there was multiple, students involved in this, not one is freaking out. Not one of them is at a psychiatric, hospital because of what they saw, the PTSD. Not one of them thought that it's a bad idea and call the cops or whatever the case may be. They all just were able to handle this without any problems. All of them had no emotions, every single one of them. I think that the theory was there's like 5 people there. I don't know. 5 people are going to go into a house, and we talked about the DNA, right? 5 people go into, you guys can't believe that one person went into the house and didn't leave DNA, but now it's supposed to be logical or plausible that 5 people did. Bryan Kohberger couldn't have done it because one person can't go in there and leave DNA, but it's plausible that 5 people did just because it proves Bryan Kohberger could be innocent. That's how it sounds. It doesn't make sense. All right, let's see. I'm going to answer a couple more, and then we're going to call it a show. Let's see. What about the unknown DNA profiles at Drunk Turkey Show? Game changer. These profiles weren't taken from the victim's rooms now. So they were taken from the area of where the crime was committed, or 2 of the bodies, where one of the areas where the crime was committed. So what that means is it was in one of the areas. It wasn't in, in both, right? There's only 2 bodies on the 3rd floor, 2 bodies on the 2nd floor. Now, the defense team was singing about where the one of the DNA profiles was found. It was found in a glove outside of the house. Why would you be so vague to describe where the 2nd and 3rd DNA profile were found inside of the house? Don't you think that would be more important than just saying in the area? Maybe because by saying in the area is the closest way of putting it towards that's the closest you can come to without saying it's not, without being obvious, it's not has anything to do with it, right? Because if it was on the bed, there's 2 unidentified, DNA samples on the bed. It's on the bodies. It's on the bodies. On the sheath, it would say it on the sheath. They said that it's in the glove outside. So why be so specific for the one that's outside and not specific for the ones inside. And if your goal is to get your client off, and if something that kind of points to somebody else, don't you think you'd be a little bit more specific about those things? I mean, you're trying to say that they didn't investigate anybody else, being specific about where those DNA locations were, and if it was on the bodies or on the bed or on the sheath. Don't you think that, Anne is going to be singing about that? They're not. Instead, they're trying to argue to put things in that point to Bryan Kohberger's guilt that's not admissible in court as some sort of evidence that's going to help him. Instead, they're looking at 1880 law, trying to get a technicality off on him. Like I said, I mean, it doesn't mean he's guilty or anything like that. It seems like when you look at the tactics of the defense, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like a tactic from a defense that thinks that their guy is innocent. Just my opinion and my observations. I mean, you look at what Richard Allen's attorneys are doing, right? You look at how they're trying to prove that he's innocent. They believe he's innocent. They're not looking at 1880 law. They're not looking at, hey, there's this technicality, let's get this off. No, they're actually putting real information out there and saying, hey, this person could have committed this crime. This person could have committed that crime. This person had opportunity and this, that, and a third. Right. There's a difference there. There's a big difference. Evidence is evidence in this case. I agree. Let's see. Lisa goes, Daniel, I would love a whole live that breaks the phenomenon of how people can say and stray away from logic and common sense to support anything and everything else. It really boggles my mind. To me, it comes back to trying to be right. Right. If you think that you are right and you don't want to, you can't admit that you're wrong, then, it's kind of like, to hammer everything's a nail. All the information that comes out is somehow manipulative, somehow points to this person's innocence, and somehow proves goes along with their narrative. And if you have somebody who's refusing to acknowledge when they're wrong or acknowledge a change in opinion, I would just be careful about the information that you gather. I'm not saying not to watch anybody. I'm not saying any of those things, and it has nothing to do with even YouTube. I mean, it can be with anybody. You know what I mean? In every situation. It just seems like they should investigate the other DNA. But why? There's resources that are needed and are required. If you have information like that points to this guy, have all the evidence that proves that he's your guy, why investigate? I mean, you're going to investigate everybody else in the world? And I get it, why not just, look at the DNA samples? And, I don't know. I think it comes back down to resources. It comes down to policy from the FBI. I think that, if they did things by the books, their policy says that, they only assist if there's no suspect. So once they came out with a suspect, the Bryan Kohberger from the first sample, they can't really work on the other ones. Doesn't mean that, Othram can't do it or a private lab can't do it. It sure can. But when you have all evidence that points in one direction, I don't understand why continue to investigate other people unless you think that there's a possibility that other people were involved. You don't arrest somebody with a felony or a death penalty murder, right? And you're going for the death penalty without having evidence, right? You're not going to say, all right, we're going to this guy just to arrest him and think that there's a possibility it's not him or it's somebody else. Now, do they get it wrong sometimes? Yeah. No, it can happen. I'm not saying that police are perfect or any of those things. And I've acknowledged that those things happen. But in this situation, I don't see it. Your scenario doesn't make sense because we know that Kaylee and Xana fought back. So the killer couldn't have knocked out Xana. I didn't say, if somebody gets knocked out and then the attention goes back to Ethan, to say that the person that's knocked out doesn't regain conscience at a certain point, right? And how do we know that they actually fought? They had defensive wounds. Defensive wounds doesn't mean fight back. Defensive wounds can mean that they put their arms up to deflect, something, or they grab the weapon, as the killer was attacking them. It doesn't mean they fought back. I think you're getting a little bit confused with those two. And if they fought back, where's the sound? Where's the audio of the fighting back? I want to think that these girls and Ethan did all their best to survive and did this, but the truth is, in this situation here, the evidence all points to somebody went in there very silently and attacked people that were asleep and intoxicated. And as far as the front door being open, Chief Fry said that that's not accurate. He had never heard about that. But what he did say was left open was the rear sliding glass door. So I think that, I think that's a clear example of where somebody can get some minor detail wrong and everybody assumes that it has to be 100% right and that it's 100% correct and that that's the way it went down. And then when you go listen to the police, they don't say that. Chief Fry had no knowledge of the front door being left open. What there was the rear sliding glass door being left open. In fact, I'm going to try to find it here in a little bit before we go so I can show you guys said where he says it. Which live was it? I'd have to go back and find it. It was a while ago. Was it this one? Oh. It was the one where we're talking about. So Enan Harsh came out on Truth and Transparency, and he had told Lena about that he had seen a white Elantra parked in the far back area. And the reason he recognized it a few times seen parked back there was because his girlfriend drove a white Elantra, and he thought that his girlfriend was stalking him. It was in that video. I got to find it, and I'll put it out there. But yeah, the backsliding door was what was left open. Looks guilty to me. Besides the back door, was there a window or door open? I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you. I do know that the officers weren't sure, where, the entry point and the exit point were. And it's probably because, they weren't sure when they arrived there if the backsliding glass door was left by the killer, if it was one of the persons that went into the house, if it was one of the surviving roommates. So they probably had to, go through that and figure it out. But from what I understand, and even talking with Ms. Goncalves, is that they believe, law enforcement believe, that the killer went out the front door and left the back door, never closing or opening it again. Just that one time. And for me to think that that's the one time that they opened it, and that's the belief, it's because he didn't want to touch it 2 times. Because if he touched it multiple times, that's multiple chances for him to get his DNA on that door. All right. So if he's doing that and he's going to that extent, you look at the fact that, why did he take a long ass drive back home? Right. Why did that? Because in my opinion, he's aware how law enforcement are going to investigate him. If I saw a crime like this happen and I was the investigating officer, what I would do is say, all right, we have a white Elantra that's leaving this area, white 4-door sedan. It's fleeing in this direction. There's roads that go out to these different cities. Let's get surveillance cameras from those cities. And, if one of them is 10 miles away, I want to get, 40 minutes of that video. If one of them is, an hour away, you're going to want to get, window, right? You have a lot of tips coming in, resources aren't there. So you're going to get just a certain window to look at. And, I would assume that if the person that committed this crime at 4:20 is fleeing and Pullman is 15, 16 minutes away, that at the latest that this person is probably showing up is maybe 45 minutes to an hour in case they decide to throw something away or something. Right. But more than likely, probably looking at somebody entering that city within 20 to 30 minutes. Right. So you go look back at the surveillance cameras and nobody comes in. So then you go look at Blaine, Idaho, Nobody's coming in there. So you have no idea. So it appears almost that the killer probably stayed in Moscow, which is why, if you go back to when the picture came out, from the gas station, that was it was coming in from a certain direction. After that is when we find out that police are starting to go outside of Moscow. They're starting to look further away. What does that tell me is at that point, they had no information that said that he hit that area. So that means that they went and looked at the cameras, security cameras coming into Pullman, Blaine, and all these other areas, and they didn't see it. And so he took this long route just to elude that investigation. Because if you go and look at it at you pull up the Pullman police or Pullman security cameras or traffic cams and you see a white Elantra in, at a specific time, that's going to tell you that either the perpetrator either lives there in Pullman or had to drive through there to get to Moscow. So that narrows down where you're trying to find and who you're trying to locate, right? And that's how you do your investigation in that aspect. So he did that knowingly because that was going to happen. So he knowingly took this long route, in my opinion, to elude that investigation. And if you have a guy that's doing something like that, who's not touching the back door multiple times, that tells me that this was somebody who planned out a lot in advance, right? Somebody who understood how he was going to be investigated and used that understanding and knowledge to elude this investigation. Now, when it comes to the investigation, but now that they got his information and they know that, his knowledge, there's evidence of him eluding, those investigations. His phone being off for that specific time, him driving around in that long route to elude the investigation, him not touching the door, or closing the door behind him or any of those things, just opening it, going in and coming out, him not checking Dylan's door in a pantry or closet or any of those things because of its location next to the staircase, right across from the opening of the kitchen. And maybe that's the reason why he didn't touch it. Right? He could have thought it was a closet, a pantry, any of those things. It's right next to the stairs. You can't get a view from that angle unless you're in the backyard. What the house looks like inside. And went out and tried to figure out what the interior of the house looked like to get a layout of it. There wasn't a virtual tour at that time like there was a couple of months ago where you can begin and see exactly where to go. The only thing that was available were images off of like Zulu or Zillow and Trulia and all these other places. And they weren't in order. They weren't in location. Like you had to try to physically figure out where each of these places or each of these bedrooms were. And some of them is almost impossible because of the positioning of the picture or the camera. So, I think that there's reason to believe that he go in there and he didn't know everything, but knew enough. And had he not left the knife sheath, like I said before, he wouldn't have gotten caught when he did. Is it possible that he gets caught later on? I think so. I think that he does. But not in the time that they had him there. All right, so let's see. A truly savvy perp would not have taken his own vehicle. Well, think again, whose vehicle would he have taken? Is he going to steal a vehicle? And if he's stealing a vehicle, is he going to, well, then if you steal a vehicle to go commit a crime, now you got to get away with two crimes. You got to get away with the theft of the vehicle and the murders, right? If you borrowed the car, let's figure out who it is, right? He's Bryan Kohberger. He's new to the area, doesn't know very many people. He's in criminology class. He's a teacher's assistant who has been described as somebody that has problem, he's antisocial. So who are the people that he'd probably be closest to? Probably other students, other professors, those would be in his inner circle, right? If you have somebody whose goal is to be in law enforcement and they lend out their car to somebody and the night that they lend out their car, a murder happens, don't you think that person's going to come forward and talk about it? Right. What about going and renting a vehicle? Police department would check with all rent-a-cars, things like that, and also check out the car lots to see if there was any Elantras that were purchased in the last, X amount of time, or if somebody took one home for the weekend. I don't understand where this thought that taking somebody else's vehicle is smart, because it really isn't. But I would like to, like the criminals out there to believe that that's the smartest decision, and they'll continue to get caught. I thought DM said he went out the back. Yeah, that's what DM said, that he was walking towards the kitchen, and that the probable cause affidavit states because she doesn't see him anymore after that, or anything after that from him, that they believe that he left through there. His own family thinks he's guilty. And that's been speculated, but I think. Let's see. Taking a different vehicle just leaves more evidence. Foolish criminals always get caught taking cars. Yeah, I agree. Daniel needs a banner with just explanation why he drove his own car, just running permanently next to this square banner. You're probably right. That's the one thing that I have to explain multiple times. It's like, that one doesn't make sense. Who confirmed that KG and MM were awake? Only confirmed KC or XC and M were awake. That's true. Nobody confirmed that they were awake. I think that the Goncalves family was told that she was cornered, Kaylee was, and based on what was laying and things like that. But the biggest clue to me that there wasn't this big fight is there's just no sounds of it. There's audio that is 50 feet away, pick up whimpers and not pick up, the sounds of somebody fighting for their lives. I don't see that. Could be wrong, but the whole idea is not to get caught. That's why you drive your own car. Yeah, I mean, you have time with your own car. You can prepare your own car, right? You can Dexter it out in the inside, and then after the crime, you can clean it. And there's nobody there to say, hey, this person borrowed my car, or this person did that. There's a lot of loose ends there when somebody borrows a car or steals a car or any of those things. They were all awake. Where is that proof in Kaylee and Maddie's phone history? I don't think they were all awake. I think the only one that was awake was Xana Kernodle at that time. I think that Dylan Mortenson woke up during the commission of the murders in the third floor. She heard the sounds of it happening, and I think that she woke up. The killer went down, did what he did, and I think that as far as her actions go for not calling 911 or any of those things, I have no idea. I don't, I can't explain it. Does it look suspicious? Yeah. Does it look weird? Yeah. But that's going to look suspicious. That's going to look law enforcement investigating this case. And I would be surprised if they didn't investigate her to the fullest. And not just Moscow Police Department. I mean, the FBI, Idaho State Police. I'm sure that they all had their hand in trying to figure out if there was something there that ties her to this case as to why she didn't clean up. I mean, we all speculate here and there about theories as to, cleaning this or doing that. Was it drug related? Were they trying to get something out of the house? Those are theories that cops go through, and they go and look for evidence of that, in phones, in text messages, in history, through warrants, through downloads. And I just don't feel like it's there. This is going to be the last thing I'm going to say. It says BK shut his phone off for exactly 2 hours, and the cops first checked 2 hours of cell activity around the murders. I thought that was pretty interesting. That is interesting. That is. Well, I want to thank everybody that's joined. Appreciate everybody. We'll be back on Monday. And then again, not this upcoming Wednesday, but the Wednesday after, we're going to have Ashton Forbes on. He's going to be talking to us about the Malaysian airplane that went missing, hasn't been found. Yeah, he believes that maybe perhaps there was some UFOs involved. So we'll check that out, and hit that like, hit that subscribe. I want to thank everybody that's come out with their opinion. If you agree with me or not, And like I said, I'm not trying to put down anybody or any of those things. Today what I wanted to do is actually come up with put our best foot forward as far as, how these theories really would work in this situation. And unfortunately, we just can't find one, right? Outside of the one that the police, have found. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you guys. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.